OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
+7, OTB AM. Very welcome along to the show. Shane, good morning to you.
Good morning, how are things?
Kathleen, what's happening?
Good morning, guys. How are you?
No tea.
No tea. It's very sad.
Got me a cup of tea this morning.
Both forgot. Kathleen actually went to the effort of making up.
I made a cup of tea and then I got chatting to Phil about the squad that's been announced today for the World Cup and asking me had I read Vera Pauw's latest interview, and then I was like, oh, the time. I'm supposed to be in my chair getting set up and I forgot my tea.
You're like, did you ever have a teacher in school where you'd go, like we had one where you go in and you go, oh, sir, tell us about that Galway game.
Oh yeah, distractions.
Where that thing happened.
Yeah.
And 20 minutes later he'd be like, oh, damn it, got me again.
We used to have a great teacher for that, double business on a Wednesday in Leaving Cert, and there was only like 9 of us in the class. You just ask her about anything that was in the news and she'd just talk for the entire thing, and then it'd be like 15 minutes before the end of class and she'd be like, you need to pass your Leaving Cert.
Yeah. Then the exam comes around and you're like, oh crap.
That's, Kathleen, how I feel about you, particularly at the minute in relation to the women's national team. Anything around the office, and it's like, legitimately, because the squad has been named as well. But the tea is a weird start. The tea, I'm not going to lie, is a weird start to the day, lads. I'm sorry, I'm setting a judgment, but
no, I'm sad as well because I don't know, this whole morning didn't sleep great last night, so just have been a bit rushed all morning, and I've only had 1 cup of tea so far, and normally at this stage I would have at least 2, maybe even 3 in me.
You're not a coffee drinker?
No.
10 flat whites Ronan McGarra has? 8 to 10 flat whites a day?
That's about 8 or 9 too many.
A very great man coming in here with my cup of tea. Thank you, Jojo.
I'd be wearing shorts this morning, Jojo, but fair play.
He didn't see the shorts.
That's above and beyond the Call of Duty.
Yeah.
That is what we call
Shane was just saying there, Jojo, he was looking for a
1 sugar.
tea is a weird start to the day, lads. I'm not going to lie.
That's warmed my heart now. It's a better day.
Tea is a weird start to the day.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were judging the fact that we hadn't got any
sorry,
drinks.
yeah, so did I.
That was the
No, I'm absolutely seeing judgment.
What's your start to the day?
Coffee.
What, like Americano?
Some version of a flat white, whatever I can get out of the machine there.
Right. Whatever.
Not a lot out of that machine, in fairness.
No, it's all good.
I don't know, I've never been a coffee drinker.
At all?
Not really. I'm more so since I've started this job a bit more, like there are some days where it gets to about 11 o'clock and I'm just like, I can't do this.
Oh, I love a cappuccino after the show. I used to take a coffee before the show and I've weaned myself off it now.
Have you? Why?
I take maybe a green tea or a peppermint tea pre-show.
Wow.
And then
to chill yourself out because you're worked up about stuff.
I'm so stressed about things usually. And then after the show I go out off-site and get myself a nice little cappuccino somewhere.
Right, good man.
A really
obviously
nice
a Brayburn one.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah, so that's
green tea pre-show. No, it's all revelations this morning.
Yeah.
Shane and I are just very measured, controlled people.
Exactly, yeah.
We're high on life.
That's the reason my surprise here, Kathleen.
You should try it.
And you're drinking green tea?
Yeah.
Very good. 7:30. Do get your comments coming into us, whatever it is that's got your interest this morning. Lots of stuff going on. There's been all the I was going to call it live stuff, whatever you want to call it yourself, stuff in relation to the golf during the week, and I was kind of struck by how everybody is now trying to you're expected to sit in front of the cameras and the microphones and rationalise the outrage that you've had for the previous 2 years, and also try and salvage your career at some point, because otherwise the only possibility for the likes of Rory McIlroy, who on some level you've got to have an awful lot of sympathy for, given that he was, as he said himself, the sacrificial lamb. You've got to rationalise all that stuff and then make accommodations for the fact that that's going to be the root of your paycheck for the rest of your career, and it's there to save golf. So that's certainly one thing that's going on. You have the announcement of the women's national team squad later today, which will be hopefully a bit of an indicator as to what's going to happen in a couple of weeks' time. You have Rashidat Adeleke tearing it up again at the NCAA's overnight, and then you have also the other story this morning that we'll touch on is Galway Armagh. The CCCC have decided that they ain't going to Croke Park next weekend.
You need to come up with a better name than
I know.
CCC. Every time I say it, I'm like CCCC.
I really like it.
Oh really? You're into it?
See, if you can say it properly and it just comes off the tongue.
But do you not always get to like the kind of second or third last C in your life?
Yeah, unless you're saying it very
How
slowly.
many have I done before? Do I need
There's
to?
always a temptation just to do 10 C's, but then
Yeah, it's true. Well, the
10
crappy
years
quiz
later,
committee
it's
comes
like
into it as
it's-
well, you see.
The who?
We have the crappy quiz committee, which adds an
that's
extra
true,
C or two.
CQC.
Yeah, of course.
So let's start there then. They've decided that Park Sean will do just fine for the two lads on Sunday week, and it isn't a dead rubber in the group. There are still things to be fought for. There is a weird potential outcome, unlikely outcome, where Westmeath beat Tyrone, Armagh beat Galway, and then it's Tyrone that don't go through and Westmeath do, and then there's jockeying for positions between Galway and Armagh after that. So that's kind of what's at stake in that. It's not really the absolute jeopardy. I think it seems reading between the lines that the CCCC would have wanted absolute jeopardy between the two as to who would go through and who wouldn't, and also the recent attendances from both teams suggest that they won't get, so it's 10,000 I think, is it in Carrick and Shannon?
Under
9,000, yeah.
9,000, yeah, okay. So there was 4,000 in Mullingar. I think there might have been about 10,000 at Armagh's last game. Last
Armagh fans do travel well, to be fair.
Yeah.
So they're one of the counties that will have a lot of people.
So they're kind of a bit worried that there won't be a huge, dwarf, that attendance would be dwarfed at Croke Park, and so they'll just leave it off. I'm not entirely against the idea of them having asked for the game to be played at Croke Park. If Dublin can have their home games in Croke Park, then I think everybody else should be entitled to at least put their hand up and go, hey, wouldn't mind a bit of that pie.
Bit of practice,
Yeah.
on the big pitch. Maybe that's what they're both looking for. Armagh and Galway
I think
both
that's
expect,
exactly what it is.
Yeah, to get used to it. Not that they're not used to it. They both played each other in the quarterfinal there last year. But I can see the argument for both. Like, I like the fact that the little provincial grounds getting their day in the sun. Like, this will probably be the biggest game at Park Sean with Diarmid all summer. As you say, it does have jeopardy, and I think people probably don't realise the jeopardy involved. Like, for Armagh and Tyrone in their respective games, finishing second or third, well, obviously finishing second in your group gets you home advantage for the next round, the preliminary quarterfinal. But if you finish third, there's a scenario there where you could play away to Kerry in a preliminary quarterfinal, because Kerry will probably finish second. Otherwise, you've got a relatively handier game. So for Armagh, there's a lot at stake. For Tyrone, there's a lot at stake in their game against Westmeath. So I know there's no jeopardy as such.
It's just not that cliff edge make or break, right?
No, but none of the groups really are massively cliff edge.
No, but do you know what I mean in terms of the rationale about sending it to Croke Park?
Yeah.
So
Even I don't even get the rationale from the side. Like, even if it was a massive jeopardy game, do you want that swamped by Croke Park? If, say, like 15,000 people turn up, like, there's not going to be any atmosphere. Everyone's going to be spread out. You have that in a smaller, like, there are plenty of other stadiums that they could have asked to go to rather than Shamrock, and like, they would have been grand. They would have had like a great atmosphere. They would have had their extra fans there. If there was like a couple of hundred seats free, it wouldn't have mattered. Even if they got a 20,000 seater stadium, I don't know why they would want to go into Croke Park and it be empty, hollow, and and a bigger pit. Even as well, if it's a match with jeopardy, like, I always think about what, say, the women's team said when people were like, "Oh, move to the Viva, don't play your qualifiers in the Tala." And they were like, "Well, Viva's a bigger pitch. We know what we're playing in Tala." Like, Croke Park is a massive pitch. You're putting a little bit on the line there in terms of, well, is our fitness up to scratch? Are they going to be fitter? Are we going to be able to run for longer? Is it going to suit our game better? Is it going to suit their game better? You're just leaving, I don't know, a lot of things up in the air, and I just thought it was a really weird venue to choose. I totally understand if they wanted to go somewhere else, even if they wanted to go to one of the big provincial grounds. It would have made more sense.
It's just
to
the
me.
geography, isn't it? Like, I know there's other grounds being used that weekend. Breffley Park's being used. There's a lot of grounds in between kind of in use. Like, Armagh fans were left a bit disappointed after the Ulster final because a lot of them missed out on tickets for that Derry game. So I can see why they want to push for this, because fans have been disappointed. I think tickets are only being sold online for the Armagh Galway game. As opposed to clubs.
There will be definitely a lot of fans. I think the rationale from the Galway and Armagh side is exactly like you said, that they want to get the experience of playing at Croke Park.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing. But the CCCC don't give two hoots about that. They're more saying, well, you can't come here, for Kathleen's point, which is that it's just not going to be enough in it. And then you do end up with that sort of odd situation of the ground that they're actually playing in not being enough. PWGC on YouTube, good morning to you, said they could have played the Armagh Galway game in Cavan as its bigger capacity. You said there's a game already on there.
I'll double check like
25,000 at Breffni Park, so that would make a bit of sense, but it doesn't tick the box for them in terms of the actual rationale as to why they want to go and get some experience playing at Croker.
Yeah, Tyrone Westmeath is that day at Breffni Park at 4 o'clock, and they obviously have to play the 2 games at the same time because they're in the same group.
Oh, I'm with you.
So obviously Breffni Park can't be the venue. But maybe there's another I don't know, is Brewster Park and Enniskillen an option? It's small as well, so
it just doesn't tick the box for the rationale as to why they want to change it anyway. So
yeah, they need someone big.
Yeah.
No, I can see both sides of the argument. I just it is rare that 2 counties would agree and be asking for the same thing. So sometimes you'd be like, well, would the GAA not just give them what they want? But then also I can see how the atmosphere in Carrick and Shannon's going to be brilliant. And I think when
it'll be happening,
and the Armagh and Galway fans that get tickets will be probably happy out that it's on in Carrick and Shannon on the day.
I was at Cusack Park last week for last Saturday evening for Mullingar for Westmeath and Galway.
Yeah,
it was a great old game.
Good atmosphere,
really enjoyable. I make this point a lot, but even if you're not into sport, and I appreciate that's probably not I'm preaching to the choir here in terms of our audience, it's just a brilliant thing to do. It was a really good game for a long period of time. Unfortunately, they felt shite at the end, and that was
sending off didn't help.
To be expected. Yeah, it didn't help, but the wind was going that way anyway, and Galway had a hatful of goal chances in the first half, but it's definitely, I would have always said that this Westmeath team on their day, when they're putting it together, can battle it out with the big boys.
It's funny,
they could do that for sort of 50-60 minutes.
Westmeath is one of those teams that you looked at the groups at the start and you saw Westmeath and Sligo in the other group. No offence to both of your counties, but probably seen as the teams that would bend over and lose 3 games reasonably comfortably, and that was my fear for these groups, but it just hasn't materialised that way. Like Sligo got the draw the first day against Kildare,
got fairly hammered by Rochelle.
I know, yeah, of course. Roscommon are flying.
I feel mildly offended that you're putting Westmeath in the same category as Sligo. I'm sorry, Kathleen, but that's where I'm at.
Well, who'd win between Westmeath and Sligo at the moment?
Come on now. Come on now. We're not descending into this.
Like a drew at Kildare, remember that now, and could have won it at the end. Good team there, but West, I do take your point.
Give us a few years.
Yeah, exactly.
We're coming.
So look, that's there and it's bubbling away in the background. There's been a few comments coming in as well. Conor McKeown wondering what the pitch surface in Leitrim is like with the recent dry weather. That's the big concern at the moment for all managers. And Spectre Core, good morning to you. He's wondering, Shane, if you're going to Carrick tomorrow, and all suggesting the Gaelic grounds in Limerick. There are other options, but again, I just don't.
I was wondering, was the Gaelic grounds in Limerick a bit of a funny suggestion after the Munster hurling final stuff?
Oh yeah, the Carrick, that's reference to that's the All Ireland minor football quarter final. Mayo Monaghan. I won't be there. I'll be watching.
He's a Johnny come lately Spectre Core. Is what's going on there.
No,
that's what you're hearing.
There's people slagging me in the comments yesterday saying how much are Mayo going to beat Monaghan by in the All Ireland minor quarter final, because Mayo are after winning Connacht. Monaghan are coming, don't you worry. They lost to Derry.
Don't you worry about that.
They lost to Derry in the Ulster final on penalties. It'll be a good game. So
now, go on. 6 weeks, enough of the Monaghan Miners and enough of Westmeath football and Sligo football. 6 weeks to the kick-off of the World Cup. Friendlies against Zambia, obviously in a couple of weeks. France to come as well.
Both sold out.
And then obviously the game in Australia as well. So with all of that in mind, Vera Pauw, I'd read one source saying 30 players to be named today. It's this extended training squad. Kathleen, you're saying it might be maybe a couple short of that, and then ultimately it'll all get cut to 23, which seems like a really small,
low. I don't understand FIFA, the fact that they wouldn't let them, like nearly every single manager from competing federations applied and said, can we have 26? Because I mean, like technically it's 20 outfield players, so you're going to bring your 3 goalies with you as well. So, and
they're allowed to bring 3 players as kind of, I mean, which must be the absolute purgatory of all trips to go on if you're one of those 3 players.
Well, especially because once the first game's played, that's you gone. You know you're definitely not getting called into it. So it's also the thing of like, do you keep the 3 players there? Do you keep them involved in the squad? Do you send them home? Like there was some talk that England were going to not keep their 3 players with the squad because they were just like additional add-ons, and I was like,
I think from an Irish perspective you have to keep the 3 of them.
Yeah, like
it's an experience. It could be a once in a lifetime. Hopefully it's not, but like for these players, certainly it could be a once in a lifetime opportunity. Just to soak up the atmosphere of a World Cup. I think if you're on those 3, you'll be gutted to not have made the playing squad, but you still want to be around the team.
Are you technically allowed to be involved in training if you're one of the 3?
I think so. You can be in and around the squad, you just can't
extra
play.
Long studs on and
good shout.
Getting stuck in.
That's what I do.
That'd be fairly harsh. Yeah, it's actually exactly a month today to when I fly out.
So the squad is the squad that's been named today. it's a kind of a weird one because the US players aren't featuring, so it's not a case of if you're not in today, then your chance is gone.
Yeah, so nobody panic when Denise O'Sullivan's name isn't on the list.
So it doesn't mean that let's say did you say there's 29 players being named today, or
28? I
28.
thought.
So let's say in that instance, then there's 5 who won't make the 23, but there's actually 8 that won't make the 23. So I mean, everything is still up for grabs. What are you watching out for?
Well, so I've heard through the grapevine, and it's also been reported elsewhere, that there's a few more players from the league here that have been included. So McAvoy, a lot of people were complaining about Tara Hanlon as well. A lot of people were surprised that Jessie Stapleton's name hasn't been more around the squad, which is funny. I actually tweeted that she wasn't involved in the squad from what I heard, and she liked it, so I assume that probably means that she's not in there. But she's definitely one to watch for the future. Like, I don't think this is going to be by any means a make or break chance for her. One of the big talking points is Leanne Kiernan. Obviously, she's been injured for the majority of the season. This is supposed to be her breakout season at Liverpool. You know, top scorer in the championship last year. Liverpool came in this year, made like a really good start, and she got injured really, really early on. I was supposed to be back 1 month. It was supposed to be 1 month, and then it was 2 months, and it was 3 months, and she just kept getting put back and back, and then eventually only came back the second last weekend before the end of the WSL. So I was having a debate with Emma Carroll and Phil Egan yesterday about whether she should be included or not. I would include her because I think she's one of our few attacking options. I know we saw with the US game that Vera kind of did change up her systems a little bit more, and we did actually attack a bit more than we normally would, but she's like an out and out striker, which we do not have in this team at all. And I think even just for the training squad purposes, she should be in there, but Vera hasn't ever really favoured her, so I'll be very interested to see if she makes it in today. Savannah McCarthy is another one who I'll be interested to see. I interviewed her probably like 2 months ago now, and she was just on her way back from an ACL injury. She was a regular starter when we were in our early qualifying stages before she got that ACL injury, and she said to me at the time that she'd been on the phone nearly every week to Vera about her progress. You know, she's a player that Vera favours, so she's just been back on the pitch the last month or so. So has she shown enough that she'll be able to get a spot in the training squad? Clara Reardon, who plays at Celtic, won the Scottish League. She's been on the fringes as well a lot of the time, but is also, again, one of those players that is very good at attacking and could bring that element for us. So yeah, there's a lot of ifs and buts. Lily, and there's also, we've had so many injuries, you know, even players like Niamh Fahey, she's been injured, she hasn't had all that much game time. Lily Agg hasn't had all that much game time. She writes a really good column actually for The Athletic, which I would recommend. And then we have 4 players who are without clubs, so Rusha, Lil Jon and the 3 Megans. Although Rusha did say she had been chatting to Vera, and the reason she hasn't been playing the last while is because she wanted to make sure she didn't get injured ahead of the World Cup, and that was something Vera supported, so I assume she's safe enough in there.
This is when Vera Pauw earns her wages. Like, what is she on, 150 grand? And I couldn't imagine the difficulty of having these conversations with players, having to sit them down, and the way in which you tell them is also so important as well. You're not going to the World Cup, hand her on the shoulder. I presume she tells them all in person. Maybe the ones who are not in the camp, obviously she can't tell in person.
Well, see, it depends, because we're running the send-off event on June 28th. Very exciting. It's going to be a great evening, but that's the next morning the squad's announced. And from what I know, Vera's ringing the entire squad the next morning. Right. So like, there's going to be people doing all this like World Cup build up, and you know, certain players say even the last couple of weeks while the league in England was still ongoing, it's been all the home based players that have been doing World Cup events, so like Anya Gorman, Abby Larkin, and like they're not certainties for the squad by any shape or form. So you keep going up to them and being like, how are you feeling? Do you think you're getting in? Amber Barrett is another one we don't know if going to get in. I mean,
they can't leave Amber Barrett out.
Well, like, she hasn't really played, and Potsdam were relegated. Like, she got that shoulder injury in January, and she's talked about how much she's struggled since then. When she has played, she's been playing at like right back. She hasn't been playing.
You can't throw in the squad just for romantic reasons, as in, you know, scored the famous goal.
I mean, I don't know about romance, but she would have played a lot defensively anyway, and then with Ireland would have come in and played up front. And like maybe the fact that she has been injured and hasn't been associated with the stink, maybe that's like the thing that sort of. But I mean, are we not going to revolt as a nation if Amber Barrett? I mean, I'm all about the romance. I'm like,
that'd be the story, wouldn't it? If she doesn't make the squad, that's the headline.
It's so tough though, because like it's 20 players if you take away the goalies.
But apart from anything, right? In a crunch game where the chips are down, I will get you a goal. You put me in there. That for me is like.
That's tournament-worthy stuff.
She's on the squad. She is in the squad. We'll let's fit around that, but she's in the squad.
Yeah.
Would she be in your hypothetical squad, Kathleen?
She is on the very edge of my hypothetical squad.
That's what I asked though.
To be honest, right now I don't know if she would be.
Right.
Which is I'm going to have everyone coming after me for saying that. And like I love Amber. She's great. Like such a lovely woman and stuff, and like great player, and absolutely she got us to that World Cup. But I just.
Geez, Kathleen's cutthroat.
I think
she hasn't, like, just the way she's played and the fact that she hasn't got all that much time, and I don't know.
I'm going to say, right, that we can let's discount the way she's played for the club. That we've a long history, and to be fair, it's not unique to Ireland, of players who are, let's say, like average enough in their club days and can come in and do an unbelievable job for the country. There's plenty of examples, not just in Ireland, of players' ability to do that. And she's got this stuff in the bank of. This is the most recent thing, and she, like the adulation she gets afterwards, her ability to do it, like proven ability to do it in a crunch game. I just think. I don't know. I think in terms of looking at a World Cup, there is likely scenarios in the group stages where we're going to be behind. Probably, we're obviously pretty compact defensively, so we may not be that far behind. It's highly possible that we'll be a goal down some of the bigger teams, 10-15 minutes to go. Who are you going to call?
Her ability to play in numerous positions.
Amber Barrett there.
Do you know, seriously, like, I mean, that's who Vera Pauw is going to turn to.
I don't know what I call. I know she did it in Scotland, and again, I'm not taking that away, but I don't know what I call on her in a crunch match. I don't know if
like
that
the Scotland game, for example.
But I don't know if that. But when I wouldn't have thought going into that game that she would be the person to pull the. I was going to say the cat out of the bag, which doesn't make any sense. The rabbit out of the hat. And I do think, I agree, we talk about this so much on Quigig, like I do think playing regularly, especially in the women's game, is really important, even if you're not playing at like a super high level, if it's championship, if it's like lower down in the Frauen Bundesliga. I would absolutely love it. I will come on here. You can get me to do anything you want if I am wrong and Amber Barrett makes
clip this up, clip it up, get it out
there. I know you need to say now what you want me to do, but I'm not coming back retrospectively. If she does a wonder for us in Australia, I will bow to the altar of Amber Barrett and I will never leave it. I'm just not sure at the moment.
Is there a Donegal-Sligo rivalry? Is this what we're getting to?
I think Kathleen would associate herself heavily with Donegal, if I'm not mistaken.
Would you? Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like we would spend quite a few weeks up there during the summers and stuff, and yeah, Donegal has a very, very
fair,
close place
in
my heart.
No bias in that regard.
No.
I just think
we also have nothing to be rivals about, really.
Yeah. I think
our mountains are prettier than your mountains.
They're rallying. I don't know.
I think Vera Pauw will have sat down and probably already picked her likely 23 plus 3, you would have to assume. Maybe Amber Barrett is part of that plus 3 in the basis of what you're saying, Kathleen. I do think that managers will have a tendency to go back to what they know, for sure, in terms of proven ability and in terms of what they know in terms of she'll probably have a fair idea, injuries notwithstanding, of who her 11 are, and she will be thinking about the points that we're just making about we might be 1-0 down, 2-0 down, 10-15 minutes to go. What do I do at that point? And I do think that will be.
You never know of Vera either. She could parachute someone in today and we'd just be like, who is this person? Like, she's done it at every international break so far.
And then the other thing, obviously announced during the week, is that the money, so they're going to get 28 grand a pop at the very least for turning up, which is a huge, I read somewhere it was like a 300% increase on the base level from the previous World Cup, and the FAR are getting $1.5 million, so probably still with a bit of work to do, but forward steps.
Well, like the average wage in the women's game is £14,000. So like
for for is that based off, like, because I mean WNL players are going to be a million miles off WSL?
Well, that's like a basis across, I think, England and Ireland, across all the leagues. That's anyone who's paid, whether it's pro or semi-pro, it's a basic £14,000 wage. So like there's several players in our squad who, like, that would be a pretty sweet little landfall to get, and like they deserve it. That's the thing. Like when I saw these figures come out, I was actually genuinely shocked. You know, if you're a winner, you get $270,000 each. And I was like, they're actually investing in the women's game. I mean, I'm not giving Infantino absolutely any credit for this because I know it's not coming from him. But yeah, it was just nice to see that they're taking things a little bit more seriously this time around at long last, even if all the broadcasters in Europe, apart from Ireland, who has their broadcasting sorted out, aren't.
Who's broadcasting in Ireland?
RT.
Okay. Our good friend Shifty lad, good morning to you, Shifty, says, imagine any of those girls that was in Scotland and qualified that cheered with family, friends and colleagues getting dropped for the World Cup. They'd be sick for life. Hopefully that they can all go. I mean, I don't think there's one for everybody in the audience, Shifty, and that's the issue here. And it does have a feel of that, you know, the team who get promoted right from the championship into third league, whatever it might be, and you're looking at them going, I mean, don't celebrate too hard because you ain't going to be around come next season. There is a little bit of that. And
we've been saying that since the start as well, though. Like when they were all celebrating, we were like, God, there's so many of the squad that might not be there.
Just more than we probably imagined.
I mean, the Amber Barrett one, you've really sideswiped me with that, Kathleen. I have to say that is I've been assuming, because there will be, like, there needs to be a statue to Amber Barrett somewhere
oh, definitely.
What she did. So on that basis alone,
like what she's done can never be written out of history. Like she brought us to our first ever World Cup. I remember we had this conversation on air a couple of months back when we were talking about what statues would you have, and I said I would have an Amber Barrett statue with a big toe involved somewhere. But like I'm not taking away from her from that at all. And like this is a conversation I've been having with a lot of people who have like kind of work around the women's national team and also who follow it quite closely, who are saying that like they don't fully know if she is going to make it or not. Like I do agree with you. I think Vera is the sort that will stick to what she knows, but if it was me, I would be...
This would be like Alan McLaughlin not making the 94 squad or McAteer not making the 02 squad. This will be fairly significant.
Yeah, I think that would be a big...
The most famous goal in Irish history.
Either we'll be replaying Kathleen's clip there, Shane, or it'll never be mentioned again.
But you know what, as well, like, there's something good about that as well, in the sense that if people do get outraged that Vera Pauw doesn't pick Amber Barrett into the squad, I'm like, that's good. That means we're in the mainstream now. That means that, like, people know who Amber Barrett is, knows what the goal was. They're like, why isn't she there? Like, I don't mind if we're having those conversations.
We have sort of... Have we? Maybe we haven't. Like, no?
I don't think so. I think the World Cup this year will go a good way towards that, but I think a lot of people's knowledge is probably off like 4 or 5 players, and if you were to ask for a tactical breakdown in the way that a lot of people who follow the Irish team or the Irish men's team, they wouldn't have a half a clue what to say to you. I've had this conversation in far too many pubs with men who follow the men's team, and I'd be like, oh, do you watch the women's team? And they're like, why would I do that? And I'm like, well, you literally travel to Gibraltar to watch the men probably lose. Why not watch a team that's actually going to a major tournament for once?
The other thing that we need to mention, as I mentioned at the top of the show, Rashid Adeleke has been at it again in the best possible sense last night at the NCAA's. 49.86 in the semi-final of the 400 metres to win it, to qualify for the final, which would be run off Saturday night their time, Sunday morning our time, and she ran that time, and there were only 2 sub-50s. I want to give a bit of context here, because I think that there can be an element of glazing over when an Irish audience hears about the NCAA's. We're not as plugged into it as like you would be from an American audience point of view. She's unbelievable, really, is the short story here, and she continues to be unbelievable, and she continues to set records. She was pulling up at 49.86. There was only 2 sub-50s in the semi-finals combined. She's still so young in her 400 career. I don't know, has she not run 15 or 20 of these races? And to be clocking the times that she is incredible. And as I said, pulling up, she was second quickest then overall. Britton Wilson of the US set a meet record in the other semi-final, 49.36. Now she was flat out all the way through, and she will be the form runner, and I think that it will be seen as been between the two of them come the final. Wilson's been battling injury on and off over the course of the season, so there's a possibility that the ball is in the court of Rashida Adeleke, but she's incredible. She's absolutely incredible, and she was part of the 4x100 as well that set a new NCAA record earlier as well, so absolutely flying it.
Visited the track in Austin, Texas, where she trains college-wise a couple of years ago, and the facilities are ridiculously good. I can see why the NCAA, there's money that's pumped into it. It's just amazing facilities, and I didn't even see the indoor facilities and the gym and stuff that'll be used. The best thing you could say about Rashida Adeleke is that often on a Monday we don't get her into the performance rankings. The odd week we will, but generally speaking, she's the one that misses out after doing something amazing at the weekend. We're like, we just don't have room. But it's kind of like the Manchester City in the Champions League final thing. It's like so dominant that it's almost like not a story. So we haven't built up to the Champions League final much this week at all, because we're like, it's Man City, it's boring, they're going to win the treble, okay, all the money. Rashida's dominance has almost led to her just being not ignored by Irish media, but we've come to expect her winning.
Well, we don't really get the NCAAs. That's the thing,
of course,
the enormity of them, and that's part of the rationale for it. But needless to say, setting records at that level, winning at that level, qualifying easily for finals at that level,
amazing.
Third fastest woman, as Dara points out here, over 400 in the world this year.
What was Derv O'Rourke's quote about her when she was on recently? She said
that she was going to be world class. She was
Ireland's greatest sports person ever.
Irish greatest.
She's going to be Ireland's greatest sports person ever, she said. And I was like, what? Because she said she's in with a shout of a medal at the Olympics. Imagine an Irish sprinter being in with a shout of a medal. It's just unheard of.
Yeah, so she's very proud of her, and she's continuing to do the good stuff, and we'll keep an eye on her over the weekend as well. She will feature in the performance rankings on Monday morning. Are we saying that? We guarantee it. Let's
throw it in there, yeah. We'll promise it now.
Right, there are loads of comments coming in. We'll reverse back into those, I think, at some point a little bit later on. I want to remind you that we're here with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition is available now, and I want to let you know what's coming up between now and 10 for you this morning. Graham Hunter is standing by. We're going to talk all things Champions League. We'll touch a little bit on West Ham as well. His good friend David Moyes getting over the line during the week, so we'll get Graham's thoughts on that. Jenny Claffey is going to talk to us about the final lineup for the French Open. A bit of a surprise final lineup, it has to be said. We'll get Jenny's thoughts on that. She'll be with us in the studio 8:25 this morning. Aisling Maher is the Dublin Camogie captain. They kick off their group games in the championship tomorrow against Tipperary, and she's basically becoming a friend of the show now, Aisling, and she'll be with us a little bit later on. Sports News at 9. David Sharkey is a name that maybe many won't be familiar with, but he's the person that's behind the Everest story. Do you remember that from the La Rochelle win a couple of weeks back? He was the one who themed that out with Ronan O'Gara, and has been theming it out with him for the last few years in La Rochelle and beyond as well. So he's an interesting person that we've been wanting to speak to for a couple of years now, and we'll chat to him at 9:10 this morning. And then Cameron's been in conversation with David Gough, and that is coming your way from 9:30. So do keep the comments coming into us. Before all of that, time for the cash machine.
Off the balls cash machine.
May was a huge month for the cash machine. 15 lucky winners and some life-changing amounts of cash. Mick in Wexford won €75,000. Frank in Dublin won 50 grand. Liz, also in Wexford, won an incredible €81,000. It's the winning is showing no signs of slowing down. This week, someone could win a cool 60 grand heading into the summer. It's easy to take part. We're about to give you the amount. All you need to do is take a note of it, enter, and we will call you, and you give us the number and you win the cash. It's as easy as that. This week on the cash machine, we're giving away, and it's an easy number to remember, €60,000 exactly. €60,000. So to enter, text OTB and only OTB to 57557. That's 57557. And if it's you, we call back after 3 o'clock on Friday, June the 9th. It's today. You answer your phone within 5 rings. Tell us the prize amount, and you will win the money. So to enter, text OTB to 57557. That's OTB to 57557. Cost is €2.50 plus your standard message rate to play. You have to be over 18. You're playing across the Goal Out network of stations. Full terms are on our website. Check out offtheball.com. Get your entry in by 3 o'clock Friday, June 9th. And we can be calling you. Answer within 5 rings. Tell us the prize amount and the cash is yours. €60,000 exactly. Text OTB to 57557. That's 57557. At 8:05, we're back after these.
Off the Balls Cash Machine.
3, 2, 1, go.
Whether you're a Drive to Survive fan or Grand Prix expert, now you can stay up to date with the world of F1. The F1 Pod on Off the Ball with Chicago Town Pizza, the ultimate podcast for F1 fans. The F1 Pod will keep you on the edge of your seat. For the best insight and analysis, subscribe to the Off the Ball daily podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. The F1 Pod on Off the Ball with Chicago Town Pizza. Formula One? Yeah, we go to town on it.
If Cleary was playing, it's such fine margins that if he was playing, I was saying, well, that shores up a little bit more in the defence in terms of he's a great linchpin for them in defence, comes out very solid there. And it's very hard to find a solid fullback, that's consistent there. And Cleary has great physicality as well, which is, you always need spades of that when you're playing Limerick. So that's going to be one area now for Clare. And as we've seen earlier in the round robin, particularly against Tipperary to start, that they were leaking a lot of goals, putting a lot of pressure on themselves to do hard work to get over the line to win games. So that's the area that Clare are going to be looking at. And Clare are a very emotional team. Like if you were to ask me who's an emotional team, they play off emotion, that's Clare. And so they're going to come at this game, fire and brimstone. And if they smell a small bit of doubt with Limerick, that I feel will only feed into Clare then, because they're going, we have these lads again. And you look at Limerick then, and obviously Limerick are an exceptional team, but they do have hints of what I would say ourselves in 2013, whereby we were still an excellent team, absolutely. But because we had one or two results that went against us, whereby Dublin bet us, we picked up one or two injuries, it was just going week on week trying to get back to that stage where you were this runaway train. Trying to get it back to that level is very hard when you're hurling every 2 weeks or even 3 weeks. It's not that far anymore. These lads are playing so regular that if you had 6 weeks off, you might get back into that flow again.
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
No, it's 6 minutes past 8. You're watching OTB AM with myself and Shane. Delight you could be with us. Do keep the comments flowing into us here. You heard in the ads there the clip of the Hurling Pod with Gough Energy, proud sponsors of the Senior Hurling Championship and the Legends Tour Series, which takes place at Croke Park. And that was a clip from the latest episode of the Hurling Pod. Paul Murphy, James Gahel and Will. And you can check out our YouTube channel and the podcast feed for much more details on all of that. Champions League final weekend. Graham Hunter, good morning to you.
Morning, how are you?
Great, and thanks a million for jumping on. We're excited to talk about it. We were having a bit of a debate on the show yesterday as to whether people generally were excited about the fact that it's the Champions League final. It's Manchester City against Inter Milan in Istanbul tomorrow night, and we got a lot of reaction from people on social, and I would summarise it by saying people are a little bit meh.
What did they say? Why? I can't understand it.
I think the rationale would be that I think a lot of people who would sit in the fence wouldn't be particularly into Manchester City winning it, and then I know Inter have won it 4 times, but maybe more recently they're not seen as one of the powerhouses of Europe.
Well, I mean, I don't want to come on and try and persuade those. You've led me into a situation where how I'm going to react if the Champions League final was between Partick Thistle and Clare. I'd still be head over heels excited about it. It's the pinnacle of European football, and I'm addicted to it, and I have been since I was a kid. I'm far more attracted by the idea about whether I don't want to portray Inter as the villains in a footballing sense in any way, but they're a hard-working team that understands its own limitations. They certainly have some standout footballers, but I've watched a lot of their play this season, and it's squeezing space, it's wing backs, and I realise as I'm saying all this, I'm maybe not selling it to those who are a bit meh about the final, but that's the fact about how Inzaghi's team plays. If they're bullies in the best sense of it. If they find they have a weaker team in front of them, then you can have fun watching them, because there's a cluster of skillful players, which would include Barella, Çalhanoğlu, Lautaro Martinez is on very, very good form at the moment, and I think that there's no mistaking how they're going to play against City. They're going to try and close the spaces. They're going to try and understand that if the City system might be complex to train, to design, but it's relatively easy to understand what you can do to stop the system functioning, which is that if you can close the spaces in which particularly Ilkay Gundogan and Bernie Silva, as I learned, the team call him, we were at training, it was a fantastic privilege, I think, when you can watch any top football team train throughout a full session. I find it a huge privilege, because you learn a lot. And one of the things I learned is that Bernardo Silva is Bernie to his teammates, which just didn't sound right at all. But if you can close the spaces in which the Turk and Silva and De Bruyne like to function, then the quality of ball that either Grealish gets in terms of being one-on-one against his rival, or Haaland getting space to run into, the quality of ball delivered to him changes. And that's what Inter are going to try to do, definitely. And I'm not saying that if given a chance they can't play. They'll certainly be strong at set plays. They'll be keen to shoot from distance. They definitely have heightened power across man for man, not every single matchup, but across the two teams they have a heightened power bias in Inter's favour. And for me, I'm going to be fascinated as to how Manchester City Harry Houdini themselves out of the press and the asphyxiation that Inter are going to try and put on them, and those who aren't excited about it find fair. But we're looking at history. We're looking at the potential for a treble. No coach has ever done 2 trebles. No coach, thereby, it's de facto that no coach has done a treble at 2 different clubs. Guardiola and Chico Begiristain would be responsible for 2 trebles if they achieve it on Saturday night. And for my taste as well, Manchester City's football is absolutely, it's stunning. It's beautiful when it functions. It's highly complex, and it's hugely risky, and it's really, really enjoyable.
I think you've sort of cut to the nub of the issue there in terms of also, and I'm in the realms of supposition now, but I'm probably leaning my own biases into it as well, about the predicted outcome of the game, and a lot of people feeling that it will be in Manchester City's favour. But you lean in on something there, Graham, that we might tease out a little bit more about that Inzaghi style of play, that sort of compact 3-5-2. There might have been, as you called out yourself, a little bit of a pejorative nature to some of the comments you make about his lineup and how they're pretty solid all over the pitch without the star names maybe of the likes of Manchester City. But there's been some fairly average Premier League teams that have got some success out of City in the season just gone, with sort of sitting a little bit deeper. Is that how you expect this game to certainly start out?
I don't expect them to sit deep as such. I do think, but having watched Inter a lot, that what they do is they try to make sure that there's no spaces, that the gaps that the 3 key footballers operate in are closed. So, and they're also bullies. They're a very physical side. I think the pits of Italian football was shown by Roma and Mourinho, and it's not going to be quite like that. I thought they were, and I knew that was coming. I'd watched Roma this season, and I think that Mourinho, who's just the lowest of the low in terms of what you want in sport, as far as I'm concerned, knew that he had to try and maximise anything to try and win, and it was a really ugly spectacle. And Sevilla contributed, without question. They contributed, and Inter aren't going to be like that. But I'm coming to the point that Shane, they will bully. It will be win at any cost, because that's built into the Italian footballing nature. And therefore, I think that if you're not an Interista, it'll be very easy watching it to put the black hat on them and think they're the baddies of the thing, because they won't They won't need to or want to entertain. They have the capacity to. They definitely. Anybody who watched the way in which Inter ripped Milan in the first half hour of the first leg of the semi-final, they were on top of them. And that's my point. So if they sniff that they've got, let's say City just have an outright bad night. Let's say City are not as prime as they need to be going out there. For example, in 2009, when Pep won his first treble, the third part of it was in Roma, in the Olympic Stadium, and it was against Manchester United. And it's now pretty well known that Pep decided that an inspirational tool at the end of a long season where they'd won the title, and they did an interesting final in the Cup against Atletico Bilbao, going 1-0 down and having to work very hard to get back into it, but ultimately winning 4-1. He gave the players in the dressing room a video composed by a local television technician of the highs and lows of their season so far, with images of their family and friends and kids in it, to the theme tune of Gladiator. And the players testify, and we made a film about all of this, so we've spoken to them directly about some of them were in tears, some of them went out with wobbly knees, and they walk out to who's the beautiful Italian singer, the blind tenor, Andrea Bocelli, singing as part of the opening ceremony prior to the kickoff. They're lined up, and that, if those who weren't already in tears, the idea of listening to this beautiful voice soaring around the Olympic Stadium in Rome absolutely set the rest of them off. And they admit that for the first 10, 12 minutes that they were in pieces, and they're just jelly. And so I interviewed Pep Guardiola about a week ago today, probably, I guess. And I asked him, have you got anything, and you'll avoid doing that again, but get anything up your sleeve? And he was like, no, the ultimate thing that we'll try to do is treat this as a simple Premier League match. The lowest key preparation, not building up at all. He said, I've learned that it's not useful to overexcite my players. Now, if that fails, if for some reason City go, which I don't expect, go out there and they're not on point, Inter have the capacity to bully them and to play in terms of get on top of them and play and attack and be ferocious. It'll surprise me a little bit if Inzaghi starts that way, like he did against Milan, because he understood certain things. Rafa Leao was out. Milan hadn't been playing particularly well. They'd had really hard battles against Napoli, and Inzaghi obviously decided, if we get right at them, if we land a couple of blows on the jaw early on, they may crumble. And he was right. It was just a total mismatch for 45, 50 minutes at least, and the tie was effectively won then. If they go out like that against City, if they sniff anything from City, then Inter can play good football. It's just that they know they're not as good a side as City. I've watched them across 6 or 7 matches this season where they have felt that they might be outmatched. And if you remember against Benfica in the home leg, when it looked like it was all over and completely wrapped up in Inter's favour, I think it ended today in 3-3 at home. So they've got the capacity to play in a ding-dong battle too, if they themselves find that City are cutting them open and take a lead. Inter have the capacity to shed their sort of boxing gloves and go for a match. I think that as long as we get goals from whichever side, and you both know that Inzaghi's side, since he took over at Inter, have played in 8 finals and won 7 of them. So, and in the last 3 of those, they've gone a goal behind. So those who think that there's no chance of entertainment and that it'll be sterile on Saturday, I think are working on a pretty partial information.
Graham, you mentioned you spoke to Pep Guardiola within the last week or so. What's he like to sit down with, both on air and off air? Because he rubs people off the wrong way, rubs people up the wrong way sometimes.
I speak to a lot of people who interview him on a weekly basis, or twice, in a month, and they will say that if you catch him when he's annoyed, that he'll maybe be sort of leaning into the question and pretending not to hear it, or he'll cough during your question, and I love the way that it's if you're catching him in the wrong day. It's a gladiatorial battle. I really enjoy watching his press conferences, and I treat him with respect, even though we've known each other now for a long time. I treat him with ultimate respect in terms of trying to be persuasive for him to open up and enjoy the interview. If whether I'm sitting down with him, whether it's in Zoom, whether I put a question in a press conference, I take as much care with him as probably I've ever done with anybody when I'm interviewing, because first of all, I don't normally expect to rile him up. But I want good answers. I want to understand more about him. I want to understand more about his team or his tactics. I'm not there for a headline. I want to understand more. I want there to be value in getting this. Listen, I think he's a Mozart of football. I think he's right up there with anybody who's coached or designed systems in sport. And therefore, while he's doing so, while he's still working at club level, I want the most out of him. So what I find is that it's undoubtedly the case that it's a benefit that there's trust when I speak to him. So I think it's a little bit I'm anomalous in that there's no way we're bosom buddies, and there's no way he's going to give me a pass. If I screw up and ask a stupid question, then I'm going to end up with mud on my face. Be sure about that. But he knows what I'm interested in. He knows that when I'm asking things, I won't be asking polemic. I'll be wanting him to explain better. So usually he tries, and I found last week he was. For example, I said to him, with the things that happened to you in the Champions League, have you ever grown to hate the competition? He just laughed, and he went, "Look, I've had experiences which were extremely painful and which last with me. I've had experiences which broke up projects. And, I coached in Germany well and didn't win it there. But he said, if I die this week, if I die tomorrow, I've played in a Champions League final for the club that I love and I've won it. I've coached 2 Champions League finals for the club that I love and I've won them. And the one he went to really surprised me. He said, I got so close to getting into the final. And he mentioned Bayern Munich against Atletico Madrid, which people don't remember. It was the final that Atleti got to the second time against Real Madrid, which was the final was in Milan. And Bayern should have won, and Atleti clung on, and Bayern and Atleti missed penalties in the first leg, in the second leg in Bavaria. And somehow my memory tells me, who was the keeper? Was it Courtois? It must have been Courtois. Anyway, at any rate, Atleti cling on and somehow Oblak maybe do it, and that was the final, the semi-final that Pep's mind went to immediately, and he said we were so close to getting to the final that time, and for him the answer was that this competition has given him personally much more than it's taken away from him. But I'll close this long rambling answer by telling you that in the open day on Tuesday, I guess it was, which was partly in the Academy indoor arena where they have a full-size pitch, and it was part of, and training was open, which was just magnificent. I'll tell you something about training if you want to know in a minute. But Thierry Henry was up for CBS to interview Pep, something that he's done before. And of course, he played in that first treble winning side in 2009, played when in Rome against United when Thierry Henry assesses himself to have been about 60% fit, doesn't know how he got on the pitch. And he was nervous. He was nervous about this interview. He was well prepared. I watched from a distance. Pep was animated, really enjoyed it. It was the only one-on-one that Pep was doing last Tuesday. And if Thierry Henry goes into an interview a little bit concerned about how does he get it right, what should he not ask, then you know that Pep's achieved one of the things that he wants to, which is he wants interviewers to think hard about what they're asking, and he wants to make it look like it might be a daunting experience. So interviewing Pep, for my taste, is fun, because if you boys interview all the time across all sports, and you know the types of people you come across. You come across a wide range of people, some who enjoy speaking, some who enjoy messing you about. And it's a test, and it should be a test for us, and it should sharpen our skills. And that's how I find him. I would interview him every single week if I was allowed to, if I was able to. And then my strike rate for getting a good interview from him might well go down.
I'm not sure about that, Graham. I have heard him joke about the cliche about, well, he overthinks the finals. I've heard him have a gag about that. And I don't know if that was his way of sort of ripping the plaster off and saying, listen, I'm here for it, let's discuss it, or if actually it was like a real thing in his mind and it's going to be a factor for him this weekend. Did that come up in the conversation? What are your views on that?
No, well, my views are pungent, as you might imagine. I think that, probably, even though I've heard a couple of words escape on Off the Ball AM, I won't use the word that, that I'd like to, but it would rhyme with bucking right. It's absolute nonsense. There was really one final where there was controversy over a positional strategy that he used, which was the final against Chelsea, in the oddest of times. It was at the. It was when there had been so many months without fans and so many months of pandemic, and he chose not to use a pivote, and people harp on about that because it was taken as a theme before the match, and nobody that I have seen when that final gets talked about, nobody talks about the outright assault by Rudiger on Kevin De Bruyne after about an hour, which robbed Manchester City of their best player and didn't get Rudiger a red card, which it fully merited. Smashed De Bruyne's face up. I think he fractured a cheekbone. His nose was all over the place. He was taken off, couldn't continue. It was a deliberate body check by Rudiger. It was, we're starting to get into slightly, and I mean for you guys who cover rugby so much, slightly better concussion protocols in football is pathetic compared to the way that rugby players are properly treated. But nonetheless, there is this motion that in football that there's an idea that maybe the head's an important part of the human, and maybe we should protect his life better, and there was nothing done, and that doesn't get talked about. Whereas some idea that nobody's analytically ever said that it was the lack of a pivote that meant that Chelsea won instead of Manchester City. Nobody's ever said that. Well, no, maybe Pep doesn't talk about it an awful lot, but I know that Guardiola feels that Tuchel's Chelsea was the single best team he's ever come across, whether he's been in charge of Barca, Bayern Munich or Manchester City. Tuchel's Chelsea was the single best team to know what to do with the ball, to know what to do with their strategy once they pressed the ball and won it back off City. Pep Guardiola's idea was that in his time as a coach, other teams have tackled his players, have intercepted a pass, have pressed and won the ball. But his overbearing idea is that most of the time, because opposition teams do that relatively rarely against his teams, opposition teams then don't necessarily use their possession they've won back cleverly. They'll press too hard. They'll push quickly when they're not ready to attack. They'll make a nervous pass, or they'll make a pass full of exuberance and extra. Look, we've won the ball back. Look, we just lost it again. And Tuchel's team didn't. Guardiola, not just in that final, perpetually against Tuchel's Chelsea, and increasingly in Germany when Tuchel was learning how to play against Guardiola when they were Dortmund and Bayern Munich coaches respectively. That was the thing that Tuchel had as a secret weapon, that he coached his teams that wouldn't be automatic that they'd smash into attack if they won the ball off City. They would if the gaps were there, but if the gaps weren't there, they would retrench and hold the ball and start to build themselves. And that was one of the absolute key things that won that final. And this idea that Pep tinkers or comes up with crazy ideas, in terms of generally that he's rethinking ideas, that his strategies become complicated, and that certain players, chafe under the burden of do this, don't do that, and I've changed what I'm telling you from 2 years ago or from half a season ago because this is how I see it now. Those things do chafe the players because certain players get into comfort zones and think, well, if we're winning, do not change a winning habit. Pep is not of the idea that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. He's perpetually trying to stay ahead. So some players chafe at that. But the idea that he comes up with fanciful nonsense in big occasions, I think that's just a myth.
Graham, before we leave you, give it to us in a word. City or Inter?
City. and entertaining. Don't miss it.
Okay, well, we'll settle for that, and I do look forward to the Partick v Clare final at some point down the track.
It'll happen, you know it will.
Enjoy it. Thanks, Graham.
See you, fellas.
Graham Hunter on the line there. There's news coming through from Shelbourne, by the way, that the suspected takeover from the Turkish owners of Hull City has gone through. We'll give you more details on that in just a little bit. Loads of comments coming in to us as well. It is 29 minutes past 8. It's OTB AM, and we're live with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night edition is available now. So we're going to go, I think, to a clip of John Giles from the show last night, and we're back after that. We're talking tennis with Jenny Claffey.
Last weekend, they edged out Manchester United in the end. The scoreline was close. Did it feel like a close game?
I thought they outclassed United, to be quite honest, Nathan. I think, as we know, City got a penalty that was, in my opinion, outrageous to put them in the game, to make it 1-1. You know, City
the Jack Grealish handball.
Sorry?
The Jack Grealish handball. You weren't having it?
Yes. Yeah. You know, that was that put them back in the game when City were on top. City were playing really well, but City did well. They overcame that particular situation, Nathan. You know, and deserved to win it.
Very competitive.
Yeah. Now it is 8:30. Leave your earpiece in, Adrian. I think is the.
We're just talking about snooker there.
Keynote for that. We got wandered into talking about snooker with Jenny Claffey. Good morning to you, Jenny.
Good morning, guys.
Clunkier than expected intro into this item. How are you keeping?
Yeah, very well, thanks.
You've given out to us here in the ads. That was why I had to take the earpiece out. I was getting the ear chewed off me for not for the tennis racket disappearing from the set.
Yeah, dead right. Where are they?
We'll have to get on to make the producer. French Open is getting down to the crunch round, so that's what we're actually here to discuss.
Yes.
And the finalists have been decided. The second seed Arena Sabalenka dumped out last night. Long game, tight game, but deserved. Did you feel in the end for Machova to make the final?
I mean, it was a pretty disappointing watch at the end of that match there yesterday for Sabalenka. You know, 5-2 up in the third set with a match point. Seemed to be totally in control of the match, and then from there just imploded totally.
Yeah.
It was really surprising. Having the amazing season that she's had this year, having won the Australian Open, and seemed to have kind of battered those demons down from the past. But it was a bit of a shocking result. I mean, Mukova won 20 of the last 24 points of the match, and it was just a complete and utter disaster for Sabalenka.
Funny how a player can be in such form and then get to match point and so dominant and then just capitulate. Like, it's obviously psychological at that point.
At that point, yeah, for sure. Yeah, like, I mean, the actual match point itself, Mukova played a great point, a good serve, and hit a winner, and then from there it just almost looked like the fight had gone from Sabalenka. Like, her body language went a little bit more, you could see it in her body language. I mean, she just had head dropped a little bit, and then what happens with Sabalenka is she has plan A, and then if plan A doesn't work, she applies to play plan A plus, and she starts over trying, and she just made so many mistakes, which we would have seen in previous years, and that's what took her a few years to get to this stage that she's at now in her career with so much success, is that she would play and over try and make so many mistakes because her game is so powerful. But it's disappointing to see that creep in there yesterday.
Well, even on the success, so she's never made it to a Paris final. She's obviously the Australian Open winner from early in the year, so she's kind of been there and kind of done it.
Yeah.
But in the Paris sense, obviously she's not been able to get over that hurdle. When Shane asked you there, was that mental thing, you said yes, definitely, and then you said, but it was a really good point from Machova. So where is the actual truth of that? Because I think that a lot of people will be looking on going, is this becoming a thing for her now?
Well, sorry, what I mean by the match point was, like, there was nothing that Sabalenka could have done as such at that stage, but thereafter it looked as though she just imploded mentally. And even by her response after the match, she wasn't admitting it to it, but I think that we will hear in coming days that she will probably put it down to that something changed in her mindset.
What will that mean for her going forward? Like, because it's not that the Australian Open was an outlier in the sense that, like, she has made semi-finals of other Grand Slam tournaments, but it's not like she's got this long track record of winning in crunch games, and that's a high profile moment, whereas you say maybe the moment itself was not the thing, but the stuff that followed was the thing, which is nearly even more of a concern mentally for her.
Yeah, and that's what's going to sting for her, is going to be the fact that she wasn't able to turn it around, having still been 5-2 up, had a match point, 5-3 up serving for it, that it was the snowball then from thereafter. Like, how do you manage that as a player after? She's going to be obviously hugely bereft over the next few days and very disappointed, but you're going to have to, I mean, that's where champions are made. You're going to have to find that way to turn that around and fuel that now going forward. Like you said, like, she's never made made it past the third round in Roland Garros. But this year she has shown some great form, winning 2 tournaments. She won, and she also won the Australian Open, her maiden slam. And I think people were expecting bigger things for her. She was also playing yesterday for the number 1 ranking. I think if Swiatek hadn't won, or there was some kind of formulation that she was playing for the number 1 in the world, and maybe all these things are playing on her mind as well. You hope not in those kind of moments, but yeah, it was a shocking end to the match.
And what about for Makova then? She's been around for a while. She's had major injury issues. She was told, was it last year, she was told that she may not play tennis at that level again, and suddenly she's here. She's 26, which is not a spring chicken, I suppose, when it comes to tennis. It's like a fleeting enough kind of career. What are your expectations from her?
Well, we've been kind of talking, like, her name's been mentioned in the mix a few years ago. Kind of, she had a good season in 2019. She made the Australian Open, I think, semi-final, and beat some really good players. Like, she's 5-0 against top 3 players. Like, so she's had some great wins in her career, but injury, she's been plagued with injury, and as you said, last year having that almost career-ending injury. But I mean, you just, if she can get a run of form this tournament, who knows what she can perform in the grass, or can produce in the grass season and then in the hardcourt. You'd like to see that it's not just a fleeting moment for her, but coming into the final on Saturday, I see Swiatek taking this fairly handily.
It's hard to make a case against, isn't it? Like, and as you say, the world number 1 is sort of tied up. She's overwhelming favourite, it seems, and yet to lose a set in France. I kind of was thinking about it last night and sort of had the same view as I have about the Champions League final, in that, like, I just kind of I think everybody expects it to go one direction.
And that's almost disappointing, because
it is a little bit.
You go into the final and we kind of know that Swiatek is going to win that. I mean, it would have been a spicy final between Sabalenka and Swiatek, because Sabalenka has actually challenged Swiatek this year. She's beaten her twice, so there's a bit of a rivalry going on there, and as I said, I think they're playing for the number 1 ranking and all that, so it would have been great to see that. So I mean, I think it's pretty one-sided in Swiatek's favour.
Interesting to see her beat the Brazilian, first Brazilian to make a Grand Slam women's semi-final since 1968, I read somewhere. So, like, it's good to see different countries that aren't usually represented in Grand Slams represented, because clearly the interest spikes in countries as a result.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and Brazil isn't exactly, they're not necessarily known for their tennis, except for Gustavo Curtin. He won it, I think, 26 years ago. He won the on the men's side, and since then they haven't produced any really top 20 players. And she's a super player. I did admire. She had a great season last year at the start of the season, and then fell apart in the grass season as well. She won a few tournaments last year on clay. Amazing ball striker. I was watching that match there yesterday with Swiatek. She really challenged Swiatek. That was the first time she'd been pushed this tournament, Swiatek, by Haddad Maher. She just plays this lefty, very powerful game, has an amazing attitude. Like, I mean, if anyone's watching, she's a super player to aspire to be like on the court. She's so positive, has great attitude. So you just hope again, like, that she can emulate that now going forward.
Well, Adrian's point there, but the I guess the age of a tennis player, the perfect age for a tennis player. Like, what like Swiatek's only 22. So, like, what's I know it changes person to person and player to player in terms of their body, but what is the general rough prime age for a tennis player?
They say that your athletic ability, like your best athletic ability, is when you're kind of in your later 20s.
Right.
Tennis players tend to get burned out a bit quicker, though.
Well, that's true, especially when they start, and if you've played from juniors, like underage, all the way through. But then again, let's look at the men's semi-final today. Alcaraz is 20 and Djokovic 36, both in their prime. Well, their prime, if you can say that for Djokovic. But what is the best? I mean, physiologically, I think it's in your kind of your mid to late 20s is where you've developed, and but again, in tennis, it seems to be now that the players are a lot younger. Again, there was a bit of it used to be like when I was a kid, when I was like 12, 13, 14, a lot of the younger, like Russian players, like 17, 18, they were dominating the game then, and then we obviously saw the big 3 in the men's game, so we followed them through the years and as they got older, so it was kind of hard to make that decision. Is it 19, 20, is it 30? But we'll see anyway today in the men's semis.
So talk to us about that Djokovic against Alcaraz, and it was probably the game that everybody kind of wanted to see at some point. And Djokovic, with the record that he has in Paris, the form that we see of Alcaraz, the fact that they don't often meet, the fact that the number 1 ranking is on the line, like, it's just set up so well.
This is going to be popcorn tennis. Like, this is the most highly anticipated match of the tournament. I think once the draw came out, everyone everyone was hoping for an Alcaraz Djokovic semi-final. It would have been ideal if they were playing in the final, but it's going to be, I think, a really, really exciting match. Both players, he said, gunning for different goals. You know, Djokovic, this is his 45th Grand Slam semi-final, and it's only Alcaraz's second. Right, however, Alcaraz is the in-form player at the moment. Everyone's talking about him. If you look at it on paper, you know, Djokovic, obviously, if you look at it this season, for example, he hasn't had the best clay seasons, probably one of his worst clay seasons coming into Roland Garros. He's had a niggling injury. Okay, yes, granted, he won the Australian Open and he won the tournament before that, but then we've been it's all talk about Alcaraz this season. However, then when we look at those stats, like Djokovic's 45th Grand Slam, it's only his second.
Crazy.
It's crazy. And Djokovic is going for his 23rd Grand Slam, and Alcaraz is going for his second.
When you look at that, you just think there's no debate, but there is.
Yeah, but it's Djokovic. You know, we just cannot. You know, we can never count out Djokovic, and I think there's a few exterior motives as well for him. You know, like for example, he's going for the number one ranking, as we said, but also he's going to try and break Nadal's 22 all-time Grand Slam. They're both on 22, and what a better way for Djokovic, in his eyes, to do it than to do it in Nadal's house. You know, if he was to win against Alcaraz and then win the French Open, he would be knocking Nadal off his 22 perch on his.
Not in your eyes, is that what you're saying, or am I reading too much into that?
Maybe. Yeah.
I wonder as well, like Kachanov gave Djokovic a bit of a scare early in the tournament, like nearly going 2 sets behind. Say nearly, Djokovic came through the match ultimately, but sometimes like a player like Djokovic nearly needs that in an earlier round to get the rocket up their ass.
Yeah, definitely. And as the tournament progresses and it gets deeper into the tournament, you know, Djokovic starts finding his form more and more, and this is where he thrives, is, you know, these quarterfinals, semi-finals, those big stages. Hakanov, I think Djokovic started off quite sluggish in that match. He was a little bit he didn't really seem to have his form, and then once the tiebreaker came, he just absolutely annihilated him 7-0. He didn't make a single mistake, and again, like that, Djokovic comes alive in these big moments, you know, and we're going to expect to see that today. Like there's going to be no pushover in Djokovic today, and again in those matches like the Hakanov one where he won the tiebreaker, you just see like those moments, like in the previous rounds as well, he had 5 tiebreakers. He's won all 5 tiebreakers fairly easily. It's just like this man in those moments, it's just
so
superhuman.
It sounds like you're saying that Swiatek is going to that's done, that conversation is over. What's the makeup of the men's final going to be, and who's going to win it?
Well, firstly, looking at the semi-final, I do feel like the winner of today's semi-final between Alcaraz and Djokovic will ultimately be the winner. The other semi-final between Zverev and Ruud is almost just it's been completely forgotten about. I think it could be I want to say Alcaraz today in 5 sets.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I think Zverev will come through on the other side.
And plenty of emotion for him as well, given what happened to him last year, and a bit of redemption. And
great to see him back though a year later.
Given the circumstances, yeah. All right.
Interesting. Tsitsipas talking after the Alcaraz game about how he felt sluggish. He'd been taking. I guess it depends on who's putting the nighttime game, the late match. But like he was taking sleeping pills and he was taking naps during the day, and he said he just wanted to test that to see if it helped him. And he said it had the complete opposite effect. Felt completely sluggish. But I'd say that must be a difficult thing for tennis players. Depending on where you are in the schedule and the time you start, you just have to completely do different things with your body. Clearly the sleeping pills and the naps didn't work.
No, not for him. He was blaming the melatonin and losing that match. Yeah, I mean the scheduling plays a huge part. In France or in Paris in the French Open, they don't schedule those matches too late because there's only one night match now, so that to avoid that issue, because all the other Grand Slams other than Wimbledon play night matches, and they've 2 matches. So then if you look back at the Australian Open, I don't remember Andy Murray, he played that match till 4:30 in the morning, and then was back on in the next day about 8 hours later, and then was playing the next day. Like that was him done. He played a 5-set match, and you know that has a huge impact when if they're playing those night matches, but then they generally schedule them later on, 2 days later, to give them the best chance to recover. But it does make a difference, absolutely. Like that's a huge part of it, and you see that's why Alcaraz and Djokovic are playing first today, because the other guys played the later match 2 days ago.
Now that's all the less serious stuff out of the way. A couple of months ago I got on to our series producer, if we could call him that, Cullen Buhig, to say I've been down in Bushy Park and I'm seeing this new craze and we have to get on it. When are you free to come down and have a game of paddle? And I get on to Bushy Park Tennis Club, whatever they're called, and that has all gone cold anyway. I need to reinvigorate. But then I suddenly discover that your international tennis career is racket career is back on track.
Yeah. So
what's happening?
So I'm heading to the European Games in a week and a half.
How long have you been playing? A lot of people watching won't have a clue what we're talking about, so let's establish.
Is this the same as pickleball, or is it?
No, different. So pickleball is like paddleball is almost paddle is the equivalent of like pickleball. Pickleball is huge in the States. Paddle is massive in Europe. Although now paddle is the fastest growing sport in the world. Right. It's a mixture of tennis and squash. So it's played in like a glass enclosure, and you can use the back wall. So the ball just has to bounce before it hits the back wall. You have to have doubles,
is that right?
Yeah, it's only doubles. And it's played with this smaller racket with kind of like this big head, and the tennis balls are less pressurized than tennis balls.
So there's a dead or hit off it, like
and it's the same scoring as tennis, scoring system as tennis. Other than that, there's pretty much no.
Is it harder than tennis?
I'm learning that it's not the same as tennis anyway, because when I first started playing paddle, I was basically just a tennis player on the paddle court, and in time I'm realising that's actually not helpful to be really powerful and everything, because the ball just hits back off the wall and gives them the advantage. So learning the techniques and stuff has been frustrating because you think I'll just throw another racket in my hand, it'll be the same thing, but it's a really great sport. It's really quick, like fast paced, and it's very tactical as well, so I'm really enjoying the learning process.
Jenny's one of these annoying people, like plays rugby sevens, soccer, fucking everything. Like regardless of the sport, just pick it up and is good at it.
So the Euros coming up.
Yes, the European Games are on in Krakow in a week and a half's time. So heading over there. So really excited. Yeah,
that's brilliant.
This is my new thing.
Yeah, unreal. We'll check in before.
My third attempt at trying to get to the Olympics now. So different sport trying to get to.
It's in the Olympics. Obviously.
Not next year. They're trying to get it in for 2028. It's definitely.
Where would that leave you in terms of the conversation we were having earlier
about the age? Let's not go there.
in your prime.
Yes, exactly. This is it. Never give up on your dreams.
I'm okay with that. So now that we're on air, I can say that if I get Bowie interested again and corral somebody else, you're going to show us what to do if we go down to Bushy Park.
Definitely. I'll absolutely take you on.
I had to start Googling or YouTubing, like, how do you actually play this game?
I think Colin will fancy his chances better with paddle maybe than tennis. Shots fired. I'm sure we'll catch up with you next week. Thanks for coming in. Thanks, guys.
Jenny Claffey there. It's 8:45. Do keep those comments coming into us, by the way. We've loads of them coming in about all the different bits and bobs. I think we're going to turn our attention to Camogie now, and delighted to say that the Dublin captain Aisling Maher is on the line. Morning, Aisling.
Hi guys, good to see you.
Welcome back to the show. Friend of the show, I was saying earlier on, you're kind of becoming now at this stage, and we're happy for that as well, particularly given the proximity to the kick-off of the championship, obviously against Tip and the Rag tomorrow, the opening game in round Group 2, and the top two in each group will through to at least a quarter final. So you've Dublin, Kilkenny, Tipperary and Wexford, and no room for a slip, and a tough opener.
Yeah, tough opening game, all right. The other two groups, Group 1 and Group 3, had their first round last weekend, so we were watching that and kind of buzzing to get going now, looking forward to getting into it.
Points apiece this time last year in Parnell Park, and like Dublin certainly unlucky not to get over the line at that point. Obviously some things have changed since that, but an indicator that it could be very tight.
Yeah, look, I think we've had great games with Tip over the years. You know, we know what Tip are going to bring. They're a strong team. They're a good hurling team. The Rag obviously is their home venue. That's their stomping ground. So it's a tough place to go and get a win. But we've had our fair share of battles with them down there as well. So looking forward to getting out and getting into it.
I'd imagine, Aisling, you like this, like as a player, do you like this time of the year? Because you think back to the winter months probably when you're slogging through training and pre-seasons and all the rest, but I'd imagine when you're in the thick of games and matches, it just makes life a little bit easier.
Yeah, 100%. I think anybody who picked the summer hurling over the winter hill runs and the conditioning where you're told to leave your hurls at home and all the rest. So definitely enjoying being back at this time of year and championship. I think the weather and everything the last few months has really given that kind of summer buzz, that championship buzz. The ground is hard and everybody feels like they're in summer hurling time. So yeah, definitely these are the months you play for, you know.
Is this your first run of captaincy for Dublin?
It is, yeah, it is.
Is it your first run of captaincy overall, or is it something you've done before?
I've done a few of the club bits and that, but first run with the county, all right, yeah.
And how are you finding it?
Yeah, good. Like, to be honest with you, it's a great team. There's plenty of girls in there that have a good bit of experience, that are doing as much, if not more, of the work than I am. So it's not falling on my shoulders too much in terms of workload or anything like that. There's plenty of people to spread it around with. So I'm just taking the title and not taking any of the work to go with it. So
as any good leader would say, Aisling. But it is true that the model or the idea of captaincy, like even of leadership, has changed so much over the last sort of 10 years probably. What type of a captain do you see yourself? Is it, just to expand a little bit on what you've said, is it like are you vocal, is it lead by example, or where do you sit on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably one of those players that never really stops talking regardless of whether I'm captain or not. So the only thing is the girls are forced to listen to me a little bit more now. But no, I think exactly what you said there with the leadership groups and stuff. That's something we started doing probably 5 or 6 years ago at this stage, kind of developing those leadership groups where you have girls from, whether it's each age group or whether it's making sure you have a girl from one of the clubs that has bigger numbers, just to make sure the kind of whole team is represented by a group of maybe 5 or 6 players that can come together and make leadership groups as a mini team as such within the team, and I think that's very effective. So a lot of the time as captain, maybe all you're doing is kind of being a communication between that group and management, or making sure messages go up and down accurately between the two. But I think that leadership group idea is really taken off in Camogie anyway in recent years, and I think it's very effective. So happy to let them do the bulk of the work, and I'll just keep giving out as well anyway aside from that.
It can be like, even that stuff that you've described there, it can be like an emotional drain on some level, where you're on one part obviously trying, particularly given your position and given your role around place balls, it can be an emotional drain obviously to sort of pull away from that. Do you find that?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, like as a player, I remember like playing camogie in college and stuff like that, and having a county team and having a pretty serious club team as well, and thinking, will I play with college as well, won't I? And coming to the conclusion, look, I'll go in and I'll play, but I won't get too emotionally involved, and I won't get involved in any of the background stuff, and I'll just show up and I'll train when it suits me. And sure, that never happened because it's the type of player you are. Do you know what I mean? You can't be involved in, like, I was playing Division 3 colleges with Trinity when I started, and like, it doesn't matter what level you're playing at, you nearly get more frustrated playing at that level, trying to drive the standards up, than you would going out and playing in senior inter-county or something. So it's probably the type of player I am, that I'll always be emotionally involved in where the team is and what we're doing, and I don't think that changes because you're captain. Obviously it is something that you manage with your own play regardless of who you are on the team, but I'm getting enough experience at this stage that I'm kind of getting used to that. So
hopefully you won't have to sample too much of it. I know obviously the Leinster final didn't go your way, but hopefully you won't have to sample too much of on the defeat side of things. But do you think you take it harder as captain?
Geez, I don't know. My family probably say I stopped talking to them anyway for the last few years after losses. So I don't know. I suppose yes and no. I don't know that being captain necessarily is what makes me take it harder, but definitely, I'm one of the senior players probably on the team this year, probably have more experience, and a lot of the girls, it's a very young team that's in there. So I think from that side of it, maybe you take that little bit more responsibility on your shoulders, or take it a little bit harder. Look, you're not going to get to play forever. There's only so many Leinster finals you get to. There's probably even fewer you get to, where you come into the closing minutes and you're giving Kilkenny a good run. So obviously going to take a loss like that hard, but I think in general, we can look back and say it was a strong Leinster campaign for ourselves. Good wins over Wexford and Meath, and getting a good game against Kilkenny down in Nolan Park. I mean, short of winning it, there's little else you can ask for than that, in terms of All-Ireland Championship prep. So still able to eventually look back and reflect on it as a positive experience, if not in the immediate aftermath.
Yeah, I know it's tough sometimes actually to take the positives out of a defeat, but you really do have to look at that Kilkenny game and say, right, it was in Nolan Park, they're All-Ireland champions. You put in an unbelievable performance and executed a game plan really, really well, and also even, I think your manager was speaking about the fitness levels afterwards as well, even towards the tail end of the match, still going for it. So there's so many positive things to take out of that game.
Yeah, 100%. And, I think a lot of what we'd worked on in the previous two games kind of came true for us in that Kilkenny game, in terms of, we'd a really close game with Wexford in the first round. We were in some ways lucky to come out on top of that, bet them by 2 points, I think it was, in the end. And then we had a more comprehensive win against Meath and brought a lot more scorers into it, and had a lot more girls taking points and stuff from play. So that was something that we really wanted to continue into the Kilkenny game, and it was something that we managed to kind of improve on and to integrate into our performance in the final. So definitely a lot of positives from that perspective in the type of performance we're going after and what we're trying to do. But we see these things in hindsight, but ultimately we're playing, because we want to win and because we want to come out on top of those games. So we'll still use it as fuel and drive on again now for the All-Ireland.
You've spoken to us before on the show, Aisling, about the 8 or 9 managers that you've had in your time at Dublin, and the churn that and the lack of consistency is a very obvious thing. Obviously, it jumps out when you talk about those sort of numbers. You might say, given that he's given you the captaincy, that maybe this is a daft question, but does it feel as a bit more settled under Jerry McQuaid now over the last little while?
Yeah, I think so. Look, obviously we have had a lot of turnover in Dublin Camogie. We did, a little bit more change around at the start of this year as well than we would have wanted to have. But to be fair to Jerry and Mickey and the rest of the lads that are gone in there, I think they've done a great job. You can see the improvements in us. I think from early in the league until now, they were handed a fairly new team with a very high turnover rate, partially because of those reasons that we've discussed before, I suppose, about that kind of lack of consistency for us with management. And to be fair to the lads, I think they've done a great job at kind of helping us to gel and bond as a team, and I think we've made huge strides in the short period of time that they've been in there. So so far this year so good, and hopefully we can continue to build on it.
Like you've chatted about the closing of the gap with Kilkenny, who I'm sure are at this point becoming a frustration, to say the least. Is there an overall sense, Aisling, that you're not a million miles off where you need to be in terms of the top teams?
Yeah, I think so. I think not just ourselves, but I think there's a number of kind of middle tier teams, if you like, who are constantly chomping at the bit and pushing to make that break up. Waterford we're almost there last year. Tip have been very close in previous years as well, and ourselves too, running close on the Leinster final. I think we're seeing that push the whole time. Tip obviously won Munster Championship this year. Waterford knocked Cork out after them women in probably, I don't know, the previous 15 or something like that Munster titles. So I think across the country there is that constant push on, and credit to the top three, Kilkenny, Cork and Galway. They do just continue to manage to push that barrier on ever so slightly each year, to keep pressure and everybody coming behind them. But I do think the gap is narrowing, and it's only a matter of time until we do see a bit of changeover in that.
It's a bit of a psychological thing, actually, too, isn't it? Like when you get close to Kilkenny in a game like that away from home, and even heading into this Tipperary game, all of a sudden, as opposed to maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, there's an attitude, I'd say, in the Dublin camp that you can beat anyone really, and it comes down to that mental side of things as well, I suppose.
It does, yeah, absolutely. And you have those those small moments that can have a huge influence, I think, on teams in the larger scale of things. And you have a swing of a point or two in a game that either puts you winning it or losing it, and it can make a huge difference to the trajectory that team go on thereafter. So I think it's just important for us to keep pushing, to keep creating those chances for us, to keep putting ourselves in the boiling pot with 5 minutes to go against some of the big teams, and we will eventually get that break and get one of those big games over the line. And I think once we do, it'll be a huge building point for us with Dublin then thereafter.
I wanted to ask you about general sort of progression about Camogie, and it was particularly in light of a conversation we'd had on the show last week, and I ask you it in the context of an article that's appeared in some of the back pages this morning about fixtures a disgrace, writing Paul Keane in the Irish Star here, and it's a Cork story about some of the dual players been clash arising at championship level between Camogie and football, and that's maybe the context of the question. But we'd spoken to the former England football international Gilly Flaherty last week about Chelsea's WSL win, and it had been a lot of writing about the tweaks that they'd made, I think, to their preparation, particularly around stuff like sleep and recovery and tweaks like that obviously always come out in the aftermath of a big win like that. And we were I was a bit surprised about the comparisons with the men's game in the sense that like those things have been around forever, and these are teams with obviously big budgets on the men's side, but all these things were known in the men's game, and it sort of, I was asking the question as to why they hadn't been brought over to the women's game sooner if they were known. How is Camogie set up in terms of best practice in your view now at the minute, across those areas like preparation, obviously to do the games, and then recovery?
Yeah, I think the position that we're in now is incomparable to where it was when I first played with Dublin Camogie, which was, 10 years ago, say, at this stage. Like, in terms of the supports that we get, you know, we have a nutritionist available to us, we have a sports psychologist available to us, we have an S&C coach in with us pretty much full time, you know, sports masseuse, physio, all that sort of stuff. I do think that I'm coming from probably a little bit more of a privileged position in Dublin, that you know, we've had that cross-code sponsorship from AIG, and we've probably got a lot more supports as a Camogie team than a lot of the other Camogie teams would have across the country. You know, I know girls from other counties would have been really struggling to even have physios at training sessions, and things like that. So like, I don't speak for Camogie in that regard. I do think that Dublin are well looked after. Does the exact gap still exist? Yeah, 100%, absolutely it does. And the way that it comes true most for me is in the things that, you know, as a county board, our Camogie county board can't control. So whether that's like access to pitches, access to facilities, you know, something that people don't realise, I think, a lot of the time when they give out about the lack of access that Camogie teams have to the likes of Parnell Park or Croke Park or anywhere like that, is that obviously those grounds belong to the GAA, and you know, Camogie is not part of the GAA at present, so we are relying on goodwill anytime we get access to somewhere like that. And you know, it's, if you look at it through that lens, it's more understandable that Camogie isn't a priority on those pitches. But we will never achieve equality, and we will never, you know, achieve a level playing field for young girls and young boys coming up until we do have equal access, and until we do integrate Camogie into the GAA, and we get to a position where, you know, a young girl growing up has equal entitlement to resources that are present as a young boy growing up. And I think, you know, that's become abundantly clear in the conversations that have been had around integration over the last probably 12 months more at this stage. And it's just a question of acting on it now and trying to get it into place as quickly as possible.
As quickly as we can hurry all of that up, the better. And but very well put. Aisling, best of luck tomorrow. Thanks a million for jumping on.
Cheers, thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot. That's the Dublin Camogie captain, Aisling Maher. Always interesting stuff, and it always just sort of jumps out to me, that little bit of like, it particularly, so we talked about it with Gilly last week, the comparison is there. Could you not just adopt that stuff in? And I know there's budgetary stuff, but like, that's just something that needs to happen.
Seems
and
obvious, doesn't it?
On the men's side as well, like, these are all concepts, like she's talking about it coming relatively recently into Camogie around recovery and sleep and all that stuff. Like, they're not new anymore. It's not like, surely like management teams, like, and I know it does come back, particularly in an amateur sport or whatever, to the budget side of things, but like, you know, where we know about this stuff, could we not be making you know, inroads into implicating some of it into the lives of these athletes that are making such a bloody effort to put the best foot forward?
You see some positive things, like as we talked about at the top of the show, like, for example, the prize money going into the Women's World Cup this year, that's a step in the right direction. But then like in the GAA, you see stories like the Kildare Camogie story this year has been one, you know, in the intermediate side of things, that just it shouldn't be happening. And then also even in Meath, now maybe this is just a one-off, but Davy Nelson leaving the position as Meath manager this week, like right slap bang in the middle of a championship. It just seems like not the done thing. Now you see it in the men's game, of course, managers leave not usually in the middle of the season, so that'd be a concern, you know, that you see stories like that happening, and maybe it's unfair to just say that's on the women's side of things, but certainly you don't want to be seeing too many stories of that ilk. But yeah, a lot of the stuff that Aisling's talking about there, it's so obvious. Yeah, like, just do it as you say. And like the Cork story, so as Paul Keane has written this, and it is across some of the other papers, Hannah Looney has branded the latest championship fixtures clash Cork's dual players as an absolute disgrace. So this was a schedule to play down in a big game in Group 1 of the Camogie Championship. That's on Saturday week, and the same day the Cork footballers are down to play Galway, and there's 4 dual players. Yeah, like I mean, you know, hurry the day that the merger or the merger happens, integration, like, as they were calling it this week. If that, I don't see the impediment to that. I think that obviously they've put the committee together, and
Mary McAleese is chairing it, and that should help obviously move things along. But I don't hear too many dissenting voices as to that, why that shouldn't happen. Like, you know, on a local level, it's one of the strange ones in that on a local level at a lot of clubs, the clubs are way far ahead of what's happening at the top, in that they are sharing, the smarter ones sharing facilities and allowing it a one club for all scenario. But
and I kind of hinted at this during the week as well. Like, if you're Jarlath Burns coming in as GAA president next year on a what is it, 3-year term, like the GAA integration slash merger, that can be his thing that he's remembered for. You think back to some of the GAA presidents of years gone by, and you almost forget they existed because they didn't actually do anything. Like, they were just that figurehead that sat at the top of the GAA and presented the trophies or whatever else. They did nothing. So, like, I think back to, maybe I'm Monaghan bias, but you think back to Sean McCaig, for example, who adopted the Article 21, wasn't it, allowing the former British soldiers to play Gaelic game, you know, something with actual impact that you can be remembered on.
Well, that'll be a big one. That's the biggest.
Well, that's Jarlath's legacy. Like, can he bring it in between 2024 and 2027?
The appetite is there. I don't think that's as hard to do. That's the bizarre thing to me. That's probably the nub of the issue, Shane. It doesn't seem as if the British soldier one was so controversial and addressed so many sort of areas of dispute. I don't know who is disputing this. It just like, go ahead and do it. Like, but
and the only impediments to it, possibly, and from chatting to Katie Liston and Conor Myler during the week on the integration, like, the only impediments are financial. Do you know? It's always financial.
Yeah.
So, or else use of pitches isn't
a load of money slashing around in there.
Yeah. 100%.
Fix it, like.
Yeah.
We touched on the news from Shelbourne just a little bit earlier, and confirmation on the Shelbourne website this morning that the Turkish media mogul Akun İlkali is the owner of a global media company and has become the majority shareholder in Shelbourne Football Club. They say founded one of the biggest independent media and entertainment companies, empowered with the vision to deliver the investment will be used to support the growth and development of the club by investing in the men's and women's first teams, the academy, its facilities, with an ambition to make Shelbourne Ireland's most successful football club, and it's expected to bring additional benefit and create material synergy between Shelbourne and Hull, Hull City, who are also owned by the same owner. So,
speak.
Like, interesting material synergy. Don't know what that is. Is that like a transfer of players? I mean, what else are we talking about there? Don't know.
I don't know what that means. The Turks on board in Shelbourne. Interesting.
Yeah. Like,
obviously, as a manager with Damien Duff now, it'll be interesting to see how this impacts the team and the women's team as well. Like, I suppose it's good news for Shelbourne, isn't it? I mean, from an investment perspective. So it'll be interesting to see what fans make of it all. But clearly, this guy has come in and he's wanting to invest in football. Hull City has been the example that he's already got his tentacles in there. And I think from a Shelbourne fans perspective, you're enjoying this. I was just googling there. I just loved. I was googling how many times Damien Duff played against Turkey in his international career. I was just that kind of nerd.
What was the outcome of that?
Three times, including international friendly in 2003 was the last time, Adrian. So, fun fact. If it comes up in the crappy quiz, you'll thank me.
I won't, because I'm not doing the crappy quiz.
You're not on the quiz today?
No, I'm too busy.
You're too busy?
Yeah.
People are going to go nuts in the comments.
No, they won't.
Do you not know that you have a fairly large scale fan base when it comes to the crappy quiz?
A few comments.
Don't move on, hold on.
A few comments here from a little bit earlier from some of the stuff we discussed. Shifty Lad says the games in provincial towns are great. A few years ago, Wicklow earned the right to play Dublin in Leinster, moved the game to Portlaoise instead of Aughrim, a place further away for Wicklow than Dublin, says Shifty.
I remember watching not to bring Everton back to Monaghan, but Monaghan played Laois in an All-Ireland qualifier, and it was in Navan. And I was thinking, this is brilliant. It was a lovely hot summer's day. Navan was coming alive with a proper match. Carrick-on-Shannon will be the same for that Galway Armagh game. I'm probably coming around to the side of just let the game be played in Carrick-on-Shannon. I can understand the Galway and the Armagh County Board's frustration, because everyone's looking for tickets for a game like this between two of the top 10 teams in the country. So I can see both sides of the argument. But yeah, Carrick-on-Shannon on a day like that, with the stag parties floating around as well, no doubt.
Yeah, totally. And I'm absolutely on board with, I mentioned earlier on that it was in Mullingar last weekend. The sun was shining. It was like the Caribbean. I had the two kids with me. They were, they had all the treats with them, Shane. They were good to go. Wow. Very, actually, annoyed outside. I'm going to say annoyed outside. It was in Mullingar, the county ground for Westmeath. They were playing Galway.
Yeah.
Tried to get some Westmeath stuff. Now I know you'll make the point about maroon and white, and it sure isn't it all the same, but there was stuff, hats and flags with the crest on them. Couldn't get a Westmeath one outside. Only Galway for sale, and we were in good time.
You joking?
No.
In Mullingar?
Yeah. The lads who were selling them had come in from Galway, I presume, and I just thought, surely there'd be a market there for selling some. Anyway, it's a minor.
Little, what do you call the yokes? The headbands and the wristbands and stuff. At least you can buy those, and they do both counties.
Well, the last time we were down there, we got them, and I paid $5 for two small flags, and they were in tatters by the time we got home. So I said, I'm not making that mistake again. No, just the
regular
one and the wooden stick job.
Yeah, when I was younger, I used to always have to have a flag at matches. It was just one of those things. You have to have the headbands, the scarf. I used to have.
Oh, you'd be a definite headband man. There's no. No question about that.
Westmeath,
no doubt about it.
No doubt about it. Monaghan are, so people get this wrong. So Cavan are blue and white. Monaghan are white and blue. Well, as in, hold on a minute. So the white is closest to the flag pole. So it's white and blue. Blue is furthest away.
I understand your point.
If you look at them,
it makes no difference to me.
But my point is, Westmeath flag and Galway flag. Is
I think they're both the same. Yeah.
There's not one that's white and maroon.
I don't think anybody's thinking about it that deeply.
These are important details.
Nobody notices that. That is the thing.
If you're at a Monaghan Cavan match and you look up to the flags for the national anthem, you'll see one of them is white nearest to the flagpole and one of them is blue. These are
JP Wright, voice actor.
That was a school day here.
Who's always selling himself with his handle here. Amber Barrett is Johnny Walters of the women's game and has to travel. I'm certainly with you at the last part of that. Bosang David says hopefully Vera has given the heads up to players and not going to make it. That's the important thing for the squad. Feeling no one left to find out by a news announcement. I doubt that they would. We shall see. Sean Ryder says Croke Park was empty after the Galway Armagh game last year. There'll be no issue filling the lower tier in Croke Park. And Richard Murphy opens a conversation here that we just don't have time to get into, but why would you want an Italian team to win? All Roma did in the Europa final was dive, play act and time waste.
Why would anyone want an Italian team to win against Manchester City?
Well, I think that's you've struck on it there at the end. Isn't that the key point?
Jesus. Enough said.
Okay, it is time for the cash machine.
Off the balls cash machine.
May was a huge month for the cash machine. 15 lucky winners and some winning life-changing amounts of cash as well. Mick in Wexford won €75,000, Frank in Dublin €50,000, and Liz also in Wexford won an incredible €81,000. The winning is showing no signs of slowing down. This week someone could win a cool 60 grand heading into the summer. It's easy to take part. We're about to give you the amount. You take note of it, enter, and we will call you. You give us the number, you win the cash. Simple as that. This week on the cash machine, we're giving away a very easy number to remember, €60,000 exactly. To enter, text OTB and only OTB to 57557, and that's 57557. If it's you, we will call you back after 3 o'clock today, which is Friday, June the 9th. You answer your phone within 5 rings, tell us the prize amount, and you win the money. To enter, text OTB to 57557. That's OTB to 57557. Cost is €2.50 plus your standard message rate to play. You have to be over 18. You're playing across the Go Loud network of stations. Full terms are on our website, offtheball.com. Get your entry in by 3 o'clock on Friday, June the 9th. We could be calling you. Answer within 5 rings and tell us the prize amount, and the cash is yours. €60,000 exactly. €60,000. Text OTB to 57557. That's 57557. We're back after these with one of the key people behind La Rochelle's success, David Sharkey.
Off the balls cash machine.
Toe pocket goal! Ahead of this summer's football in Australia, we're going to Australia.
It's what dreams are made of.
We'll be hosting a night of celebration for the Republic of Ireland women's national team in partnership with Sky, and it's coming your way on June 28th in the Mansion House in Dublin. What a moment for the Republic of Ireland. We'll be joined by the full squad.
I don't know what we've just done. I did believe we could do it.
As well as some other great guests as we give the team a night to remember. Emma Byrne is in tears.
I can't believe it. We've finally done it.
Tune into all of Off the Ball's channels for a chance to win tickets to this exclusive event.
Sky, proud primary partners of the Republic of Ireland Women's National Team.
Out believe together, and we can go anywhere.
They are going to the World Cup Finals!
You'd have worked very closely with Checo Perez, Bernie. Like, how will he be dealing with the likes of this, though, these disappointing race weeks, week after week? Because he seems very mentally strong, and I know these guys will all have access to sports psychologists and a great family behind them and all the rest. But how will he be coping with some very disappointing results?
So I'm a bit surprised again in Spain that he didn't bounce back stronger. Maybe it's that the circuit didn't suit him, but he is one of the strongest people mentally from a sports point of view that I've ever worked with. You'd have a bad qualifying, we might go out in Q1, whatever it would be, and he would be the first person in the office saying, right, what are we going to do about the race? Even before I'd switched my mindset to the race, you were still fuming a little bit from whatever had gone on, and he would very quickly change his mindset. He has a great support network and his family behind him. They're there at a lot of tracks. His trainers in particular do a good job as well. So he is mentally very strong, and I think that's why he's been fit to enter that Red Bull team, build up and, take it to Verstappen more than we've seen other competitors within Red Bull, and be fit to stay there. He's built it up year on year. He's finished better in the championship, let's say, relative to Verstappen. So he is very, very strong. And I think if anyone has the ability to start to close the gap again, it will be Checo. I just think that Verstappen is so strong and such a driver that maybe we've not seen. It's very hard to compare drivers across cars and eras or whatever, but has really shown, and Verstappen's grown a lot. A few years ago, Verstappen was a qualifier. He would qualify really, really well, and then in the race get a bit hot-headed, have an incident, have an accident, not play the long game. We've seen such a change in him over the last few years. Even simple things like this weekend in Barcelona, not being ultra competitive into turn one because he knows he doesn't need to win it then, and he is thinking more strategically, more about the race, more about the championship. So he has developed, I think, more than we've potentially realised in the last few years.
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
You heard Shane in the break there chatting to Bernie Collins, former head of race strategy for the Aston Martin F1 team, journalist Rebecca Clancy as well, in the F1 podcast live every Wednesday. Episode 2 available now wherever you get your podcasts. The F1 pod on OTB brought to you by Chicago Town Pizza. Real takeout taste for less with Chicago Town. And I'm waiting for my invite, Shane. I don't know why the main Formula 1 correspondent of the team hasn't been on yet.
Get the Monaco recollections on the podcast.
You've heard about La Rochelle's Everest-inspired run to the Champions Cup title, the man behind that, and more in the realm of theming in sport. A man described by Ronan O'Gara 3 weeks ago as a key part of the La Rochelle jigsaw is on the line. David Sharkey, good morning to you.
Good morning. Thanks very much for having me on.
Thanks a million for jumping on. Do you accept congratulations for the La Rochelle win?
Reluctantly. It's nice to be a small part of what is a very exciting story. I think it's appealed to lots of people, lots of neutrals out there in Ireland, the UK and in France as well. So yeah, it's nice to be a very, very small part of that jigsaw.
Do you get to be part of the La Rochelle staff on the day? Do you get to the games? How does that work out?
So when I go out for visits to Marcel de Flandre, I would go with the team. I'd be part of the entourage going in the midst of a lot of very excited La Rochelle fans with flares and screaming and shouting and wondering who's that strange guy in a blue jacket. The last time I was out there, I managed to wear the colours of Bayonne rather than La Rochelle that weekend. So I think I'm going to have to get a bit more kit if I am to be part of the backroom staff on game day.
Were you down at the Aviva?
I didn't go. No, I made the call early enough not to go. I am La Rochelle's only Leinster fan, and I could do it a year off after the last 3 years. But no, I made the call that on game day in that instance, my job was done, I suppose, throughout the week, through what myself and ROG had sort of set up. So I made the call to stay at home and try and stay calm after 11 minutes, which I just about managed.
It must be a very cool thing to, like, you paint a lovely picture there earlier on with that sort of being part of the backroom team for that thing where you're not there week in, week out. It still holds that novelty almost of it being a very cool thing, I presume, to do on match day.
Absolutely. No, I remember when I went out for pre-season a few years ago, the team was sort of in a circle in a meeting room, and I was observing, so I sat behind, and Rog was very, very clear. No, you're either you're in the huddle or you're out of the room. So he's very, very keen for me to sort of be in the midst of it. So whenever I've been out, it's been very much so as close as I can. In the warm-up against that game in Bayonne, in April, I was sat on the bench up until about maybe 15-20 minutes before kickoff, chatting to a few of the injured players, trying out my pretty terrible French, and discussing maybe some of the upcoming games and things like that with the group. So yeah, it's great to be, as I said, the novelty still hasn't worn off of being a part of it.
Can we spool back a little bit, Dave, just for the people who are coming to it fresh? I think there'll be plenty of rugby fans that are familiar with your story, but there'll be plenty of people who won't. Just to spool back a little bit, first of all, to talk to us about a little bit about what it is you actually do.
Yeah, it's a really, really good question, and it's one I have to explain a lot. And when I try to explain it in French, it usually falls apart. So thancfully, I don't have to try it here today.
It's safe territory here, yeah.
Merci beaucoup. So I've been called lots of things: communications caddy for Rog, a sort of ghostwriter for him. But ultimately, I'm a communications consultant. My company is Team Architecture Limited, and what we do is we specialise in the use of themes and stories to motivate, engage high-performing teams in sport and in business. So, well, what on earth does all of that mean? So ultimately, I support Rog with his key messaging and how he might deliver some of those key messages week to week. So I'll design lots of the pre-match, post-match presentations. I'll design some mindset videos or content, and I'll sort of try and steer him through what it is he's trying to convey through the use of this idea of theming, which I've sort of stumbled into myself over the last number of years.
Was that, am I right to say that was from the famous, I call it famous because I think I've watched it 3 or 4 times, 1014 podcast?
Yes. So I would have been coaching myself. I would have listened into some of the stuff that Rog and Scott Robertson would have spoken about on the 1014 podcast, and that was the first time they'd given any sort of insight. Now, they still didn't give a huge amount, and I sort of took with that and ran with it, and then lo and behold, I'm sort of working with Rog here all these years later.
So you start to implicate that. You were involved in rugby coaching at that time with your team, so you come back to them and you say, I've heard this thing, can we give this a go?
Yeah, so I'd actually been working on a project the year before, which was looking at redefining masculinity. So it was based around the idea of character coaching. So lots of people in sport will talk about selecting on character, but not many people talk about developing character. So that was something that I sort of wanted to look at. So I was exploring that idea the year before. And then when I saw theming, I thought that was actually a better way to connect those ideas together. So I started exploring that, heard the YouTube clip with Rog and the lads from the 1014, and thought, hang on, this might be a way to do that. Started doing it, wrote it up, and then Rog reached out to me to do it for them.
It's we are lucky enough to have Rog on the show every so often, David, regularly actually, and it strikes me as no surprise that he'd be someone who'd be into the idea of theming and motivating players in that sort of sense. So essentially, theming, for people who are unfamiliar, you're using metaphors and stories to motivate and engage players.
Yes, so theming maybe has it's far more widespread than people think. People use analogies, metaphors all the time in sport, in life, in business. Theming is just maybe being a bit more deliberate with that and aligning it to what you're doing already. It's not an additional thing. It sits on top of what you're trying to deliver. So it's a new way to engage old messages or to deliver, content in an engaging way that helps players or people to learn, makes it stick, embeds key ideas around language or key concepts that you want people to use moving forward. So it can be very, very effective if it's done well. Don't get me wrong, it's done terribly in lots of environments. And some people I've had to advise going, I think you should probably stop theming, because when it becomes a distraction from what it is you're trying to achieve and trying to do, then stop. It has to align to what it is that you're trying to do. And Rog is someone who's a curious coach. He's fairly innovative in what he's trying to do. He saw the benefits of theming down in the Crusaders. And I think when he saw I was doing it, he was wondering, well, how good's this guy's French? It's not good, but we get by.
How does the whole process come together, David? Like, what's the starting point for that? Like, is it, so you've talked a little bit about your interactions with Ronan, with the players, so what's the foundation blocks for that? Because I did wonder, like, who within the organisation are actually feeding into how that theme is landed on, or how the threads of that fall out then over the course of the season.
So predominantly it's through ROG. It's probably expanding. Now that it's our third season doing this, we're sort of expanding things out into connecting with other players. The more players get to know what it is my role is exactly when I show up in a big blue jacket in the opposition colours and I'm walking in with them, wondering again what it is that I'm doing there. But it is expanding out, but largely it's through ROG. So I tend to work with head coaches or people, again, close to the top of an organisation, if it is, as I said, in business, because ultimately if we can deliver the key messages, as I say, the right messages by the right people at the right time, can be really, really powerful. So I'll tend to work with ROG, but it has to come from him initially. I can then shape it and suggest things. And the better I know him and the environment, or as I like to say, if I know what the temperature is like in the room, I can know how to pitch the message. But when I'm remote via Zoom or WhatsApp and I'm not in the room regularly, I have to work through him to do that. Now, there are other players who will come into that. And as I said, when I do go out there, I try and soak up as much as I can, so I get a best sense of how to deliver some of this content to ROG. Who are the good?
You'll only be as giving as you want to be, so treat this question whatever way you want. Who are the best players in that environment, or coaches, or whoever you want in La Rochelle at the minute that are feeding in?
So I suppose, again, for me, it makes a lot of sense where a lot of the English speaking players who have an understanding of theming, and that's something that people often miss. The Crusaders are excellent at theming because they've been doing it for years. It's part of their culture. When ROG and I started this 3 years ago, it wasn't. So we drew on the likes of, Will Skelton, who would have experienced theming at the Crusaders, Ahea West, who left La Rochelle last year. He would have explored theming in New Zealand. Tawera Carbarlo, Victor Vito, these kinds of guys. So I would have certainly sat down with them a lot and kind of discussed maybe the certain angles, but you're looking for the dynamic in the group in some cases. I certainly did try to speak French with Greg Aldrit until I realised, someone told me later, he speaks pretty good English after about 15 or 20 minutes of me trying to speak to him. But the better I get at French, the more I'll be able to connect to those players.
It's one of those, I even think it's such a new and modern initiative, and it's brilliant as well. But like, even Ronan probably looks at it now, theming as something that he could have utilised through his own playing career. Like, I even think of the 09 Grand Slam team, even up to that stage, probably theming wasn't a thing that was massively used or utilised.
I'd probably say it was used in a sort of in a smaller sense. It was maybe used short term, and people tend to do that. They tend to jump between different themes and stories. Whereas I suppose what we're trying to do is, yes, you can have a theme or a story, but it doesn't have to be the same story. What's the message you're trying to convey? The famous one that ROG and I started with was Les Premiers, which was the firsts, because he wanted La Rochelle to win something for the first time because they'd never won anything. So we found a way to thread that story of firsts, every type of way you could dice a first. And I suppose that's why he reached out to me, who's a qualified English teacher who looks at stories in lots of different ways and is able to maybe do that with it. But I think it's far more prevalent than people think. When I give presentations, and I'm giving one tonight to the Australian Institute of Sport at about midnight, so it's a long day for me, but when I present to people like them, they'll turn around and go, oh, we've actually been doing something like this previously. I recognise lots of this. It's just we didn't necessarily call it theming. So, listen, whether people knew it at the time or not, it was probably there. Maybe just not as prevalent as maybe myself and Roger doing it.
When you're talking about first there, Les Premiers, and I'm a big space geek and big into the moon landings. Adrian will know where I'm heading with this. But like, you'd have used the first moon landing, for example, as one. I know around the 50th anniversary in 2019, was it, of Apollo 11. So like, even maybe explain to us how you would use something like that, an historical event, and the stories of Armstrong, Aldrin and Collins as inspiration in a sporting sense.
So the message of Apollo is one that I've used in lots of different ways, and it's such a vast story. Similar to Everest, it's a huge story that there's so many different avenues and angles you could look at it. People tend to use Everest or the Apollo missions as one single story. They said they go to the moon, they got there, well done, and they sort of move on, whereas I'm sort of thinking, hang on, there's a hell of a lot more in there if you dig through it. So we used Apollo in some senses to look at, well, what was the ambition that was shown to state the aims by JFK that they were going to get to the moon before the Russians, at a time when it was crazy to think that they were going to beat the Russians. They were so far behind them. And then you explore maybe the dynamics of the Russians themselves, like who is Yuri Gagarin? How was the cosmonaut program so far ahead of them? How do they catch up? And then you start to look at, La Rochelle a few years ago certainly were not the top dogs of Europe. They were not the top dogs of the top 14. And so who are you trying to catch up to? Who do you need to maybe push and state those kinds of aims? And there's lots of stuff obviously with the actual landing itself. The dynamics of the crew, of when you dig into the personalities and the people there, and the invisible astronaut of Michael Collins is one that resonates with lots of people. You start to be able to align this to the group of the challenges that you're facing. So for me, teaming where it's most successful is a way of seeing a situation. It is a mindset, it is a perspective. And when you see it in the same way, as I said, there's that alignment and it really resonates with the group. And it becomes something that no one else is doing. So much of high performance environments or professional sport is repetitive, is our presentation after presentation is boring, sat in a room. This is different. And it's as I said, it's old messages in a new way that can bring it to life.
Seeing as we're dipping into our pet loves here, your Westmeath involvement was a one and done, or what was the crack with that?
Yeah, so being a proud Westmeath man, I was delighted to get the call from Jack Cooney a few years ago to help him. So about 2 years ago, I did some work. It was the season that was still struck by COVID, so the year before the Tailteann Cup success last year. And I would have done some work with him in the background, because while I say I specialise in themes and stories, as a communication consultant, I'll look at the dynamics between, like, how are you interacting with your coaches. I'll do communication systems assessments on the day. I'll think about maybe some of the values and the messages you're delivering anyway. And so I did that with Jack for a year. And then the following year came back and said, look, how do we expand this into an actual theme? And so sitting down with them and the backroom staff, it was fantastic to kind of find what it is they wanted to do and find a story that they belonged to, which was the story of courage in Katie Taylor, which ended, and I was delighted to be there again on the day. And as lots of my friends from Mullingar would say, geez, if I never thought Westmeath would lift a trophy, and I certainly never thought you'd be on the pitch at the time in Croke Park when it happened. So it was great to be part of. Jack's obviously moved on to a national role, and Desi's taken over that. And Desi would have been someone I would have bounced an awful lot of ideas off when we were delivering the Katie Taylor stuff. But theming mightn't necessarily be for everyone, or it might be for everyone at this stage. He's got a big challenge in front of him, and there's a big match this weekend. Again, I'll be keeping an eye on. So I'm not necessarily working with Westmeath this year, so I'm back to being a fan, which is fine too.
Yeah, get back in there if the success of the other year was anything to do with it. Are you still teaching?
Yes, so I'm a part-time English teacher as well, and I'm then also running team architecture as well. So
and is it the dream that starts to consume, David? Is that the ambition?
I think it's becoming a little bit like that. Like my plate is getting fuller and fuller. I'm working with an Aussie rules team at the moment, a team in the Premiership next year. I'm doing some work with the backroom staff of Irish women's hockey for their Olympic qualifications campaign. So I'm getting busier, which is great. I do love teaching. The skills I've learned in teaching help me to support people with their communications and how they present and how they check for understanding and whether messages are really delivered and whether they're really sharp or refined. So maybe I wouldn't run away from teaching just yet, but for the meantime anyway, I've managed to get a bit of balance, which is good.
Is your Premier League team top six, top half?
Sorry, no, that's
Rugby
the Gallagher
Rugby Premiership. Okay.
No. So there's been one or two international football coaches in touch with me, but nothing's firmed up with that just yet.
It strikes me that your interest in teaching and even history, as you say, David, it ties into it so well. Even other themes that I've read that you've utilised, even Shackleton's escape from the Antarctic, and even the story of Ayrton Senna in Formula One. Like, it must be nice to be able to use, I guess, your interest in history to develop these. You might also touch on totems as well. So totems is something I hadn't been familiar with whatsoever, but the Crusaders would have used, for example, in relation to Muhammad Ali. So maybe tell us what exactly a totem is.
So totem is a physical reminder of the theme. It brings it to life in a subtle way. So, for example, the Crusaders would have given Man of the Match awards when they were running a Muhammad Ali Rumble in the Jungle theme. They would have given boxing gloves as their Man of the Match award, or it might be a belt if someone has accrued a certain amount of Man of the Match awards. For the Ayrton Senna theme, which I ran with the rugby club, which I was coaching at the last few years, we used to give like an Ayrton Senna mug. We had, which was to our Man of the Match. We also actually gave an Alain Prost mug to the opposition Man of the Match, who we would pick, because we identified again the, as much as Senna, for those who've seen the documentary about Senna, that Prost might come across as the bad guy. He actually brought the best out in Senna, and there's lots of times where you could argue that Prost was smarter than Senna in certain cases. So we didn't want to completely diminish or villainize Prost in that way. So we would use physical reminders of that. And ROG touched on some of the totems that they used in the final with the photographs they brought to Dublin in that instance. So totems are just physical reminders of the theme. You're not necessarily delivering the story all of the time, but it's a reminder that the story and the idea is present.
Donnacha Ryan is someone who, has he leaned into it as well? Skin, as ROG would call him.
Yeah, so I was actually there when it was his first week coaching, and he is so hungry to learn. He's a great guy to kind of to corner you and ask you again for feedback. He wants to learn so much, and it was great actually going out there then a couple of months ago and seeing again that difference in how he's come along. So he's very, very interested, I suppose, in what I'm doing. He's still very new in coaching, and I suppose he's learning as he goes, but he's just so eager to soak up so much. He always says to me, he's like, oh no, my French isn't good enough, and I'm sort of looking at him going, French is about 20 times better than mine. So but obviously he's doing it every day, but he's someone who's very, very interested again, I suppose, in what myself and ROG are doing.
He's a class act for sure. That was brilliant. Really enjoyed getting under the skin of what it was all about, David, and we'll be keeping a close eye on your progress, be it the Premiership or the Premier League, and
we'll see.
Hopefully we'll catch up with you again down the line. Thanks a million for jumping on.
No worries. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thanks a lot, David Sharkey there, who's the man behind all the theming that you've been hearing about so much over the last little while, and it was good to get a bit of an insight as to what it's all about. OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition is available now. On Monday's show, Rashidat Adeleke is going to feature in the power rankings. Sarah Donovan will be here to pick through the weekend's hurling. We'll have a reaction as well to the Champions League final. Shane, good man, enjoy your weekend.
I will. Cheers, Adrian. It'll be nice and quiet.
OTB AM's own Cameron Hill, we're going to leave you with in conversation with David Gough. Have a great weekend.
Okay, you're very welcome back to OTB AM. It's Cameron Hill here. Hope you're having a good morning. So, SuperValu, along with its team of ambassadors in the Gaelic Players Association, hope to encourage Ireland's Gaelic Games community to wear their rainbow laces with pride and show their support for the LGBTQ plus community in Ireland. During the month of June, rainbow laces will be available to purchase in local SuperValu stores across the country, with all proceeds going to support Belong to LGBTQ plus Youth Ireland. And I'm delighted to say, as part of it today, a GAA referee and LGBTQ plus advocate, David Gough, joining me. David, how are you doing?
I'm very well, Cameron. Thanks for having me on.
Not at all. Can you just explain a bit more about the Pride Laces and the Rainbow Laces initiative and how it came to being and how popular it's been?
So this is SuperValu's third year involved in the sponsorship of a D&I campaign in conjunction with the GAA and the championships. Each year they have built upon the campaign, and I'm delighted to say this year has finally culminated in a Rainbow Laces campaign, which was launched just last weekend. It's a hugely important campaign for me because it leads to greater visibility within the GAA. And I suppose on the back of the GAA's decision earlier in the year to prevent Pride and charity organisations from being worn on playing gear, well, boots don't constitute playing gear, so SuperValu came up with a wonderful initiative to launch a Rainbow Laces campaign and to bring on board Belong to Youth Services in Dublin as their charity partner. And it's just fantastic that three very distinct and unique organisations within community in Ireland, be that the GAA, SuperValu, and Belong to, working with Pride, have launched this initiative to create greater visibility around LGBT players and attitudes within sport in Ireland.
I get on to what you mentioned earlier this year, but On the subject of those sorts of gestures and visibility, we've seen in the past in different sports that it's actually the denial of those aspects and those initiatives that have had the greater power. So thinking back to the Qatar World Cup and the One Love armband, which seemed like something of a meaningless gesture until the authorities didn't want players wearing them at the World Cup. It suddenly takes on a power of its own. So those kinds of gestures and those shows of visibility, do you think they have a big effect?
They have a massive effect, and it was no different than my own attempt to wear a wristband in 2015 at the marriage equality referendum. The refusal of the GAA to allow me to wear that certainly garnered an awful lot more attention around the wristband than ever it would have gotten had I worn it. It was supposed to be a small section of the sports paper in the Sunday Independent the following day, and it ended up on the front page of the main newspaper because it was refused. So we can see clearly that it is their refusal to move with society's morals and values and the way culturally that the country is moving that creates the greater discourse, and that's what happened in Qatar also, when there was such fallout within the World Cup for the refusal to wear the wristbands. That's visibility is key, and I'm hoping that this campaign will grow bigger legs outside in the communities around Ireland, particularly the young people, that will see these laces as the fashion statement for the month of June, and will lace up and wear with pride just as much as the inter-county players will throughout the month.
You mentioned that incident earlier in the year. I think you were very frustrated afterwards when Mayo GAA proposed to incorporate the rainbow flag in their jersey numbers, and the GAA refused. I know their take will be that they are an LGBTQ plus friendly community, but those kinds of incidents don't help, do they?
No, they don't. And I was more angry about the GA statement and the language they used around releasing a statement when they said their jerseys were sacrosanct. And I found something so religious and sacred by Holland Wright as a very frustrating word to use in relation to jerseys. I think what they were trying to say was that their jerseys were a little bit more meaningful to them than to allow them to be tampered with, but it singled out the LGBT community. It was subsequently that they wrote in rules in the association to prevent that type of thing happening, and then as a result of that we see the fallout with the Dylan Quirk Foundation. The GAA is a community-based organisation and has a huge part to play in the social welfare of people around the country, and it has huge social capital, and it should be moving with its grassroots members who want these things to happen. I mean, that was a very generous move by Mayo at the time to do something so simple, so visible and so meaningful. We had seen it on FAI jerseys. I think they played Canada in the Aviva one time and they had them, and the excuse was used, referees couldn't see numbers. I mean, nobody asked a referee whether they could see the number or not. It was just peddled out as an excuse. So it was difficult to take, but I'm happy to see that, we sat down with SuperValu. I spoke to the girls in SuperValu around the rules, and we said, we can't do anything here. The players will be possibly banned from the association or teams kicked out. However, having read the rules, boots are not part of playing gear. And that's when we came up with the rainbow laces idea.
Right, so it's a question sometimes of finding loopholes and getting across. And
there are plenty of loopholes in the GAA.
Yeah. Look, as a ref, you know all too well. I read there was a survey done by News Talk last year, which said that 100% of GAA players would be fine with someone coming out to them. And yet I've heard subsequently that you feel that a lot of players still have that fear about coming out to their teammates, that maybe they just don't feel that comfortable. Why do you think there's that sort of duality?
I don't know if I said they wouldn't feel coming out to their teammates. I don't think they feel coming out publicly is good for them. They are there. They exist within the GAA. I know them. They exist within the League of Ireland as well. But maybe they do not want to be cast into the public spotlight around their sexuality. I know what it's like to have my sexuality plastered on the front page of a newspaper. It's not a pleasant experience. There's also then the issue around, being cast into the spotlight and maybe expected to be a role model and a champion for LGBT issues, when maybe you just might not want to be that person that's expected to carry the mantle for so many others to come afterwards. And it's not a simple answer. There's a lot of factors at play. Each person's journey with their sexuality is personal to themselves, it's their own, and they all have these, different fears and I suppose worries as to what's going to happen when people find out about their sexuality. I've realised nobody really cares. Everyone's busy and involved in their own lives, and they're just happy once you're happy.
And do you feel that, as that survey says, 100% of players would be fine with someone coming out to them? So that feels like a great step forward, given the culture over even maybe 10 years ago, where I don't think that would have been possible. Do you feel that dressing rooms now are a very inclusive space? It's not really that big a deal? Or
I think there's a huge change and shift in the dressing room culture that I would have spoken about very negatively before, particularly at elite level now in GAA, which I can speak about. You have all sorts of supports, psychologists, counsellors, mental health coaches, well-being being a huge part of it, and the players now are far more equipped in dealing with that type of a scenario, and will be very open to it. They are elite athletes, and they understand that to bring the best out of themselves on any particular day, they need to bring their whole self. And we talk about that at work quite regularly, but their whole self to a game. And I think they're quite open to the idea of, that their colleague sitting beside them could be openly gay, having a relationship with another man, but that doesn't affect who they are or what they do on the football field.
I wanted to bring up the trans community in sport as well. Obviously, that's the T in LGBTQ+, and the trans community in sport haven't had the greatest relationship recently, with lots of associations taking the step to ban trans women from elite female competitions like athletics, swimming, cycling. The RFU have done it. Would you be disappointed if the LGFA and Camogie associations took a similar step? I don't feel that I will be well versed enough to speak on trans issues. I think that, quite often, and knowing from a referee's point of view, pundits often give opinions on things that they don't really understand to fill airtime. I'm not the right person to speak on transgender issues. Trans people are, and I think they're the ones that need to be involved in that conversation. I do see the controversy around it. I think it's important as role models. We can kind of recognise the influence we can have, but my understanding is that they made that decision based on expert advice, and I think it's important to involve people in sport no matter what their background is. So then, just in an inclusion point of view, just more generally, I've seen people making the case over the last couple of weeks that, sports organizations are all for adopting the rainbow flag into their logos and everything, and yet there is a sizable portion of that community who don't feel represented by sports and feel like those moves marginalize them and ostracize them a bit. What do you feel, given the journeys that you've been on as a member of the community? How do you think those sporting organizations can incorporate them a bit more and bring them back into the fold?
Well, I suppose it's a little bit more than just incorporating a pride flag or lighting up your stadium in pride colours or flying a flag inside the stadium. There needs to be conversations around inclusivity, but it doesn't need just to happen at top level down. It needs to happen in clubs, and that can be a manager of an under 14s team watching a 10-minute presentation released by Croke Park on diversity and inclusion, which will give him the ability to sit down with his 13 and 14-year-olds and have a conversation around inclusivity. What do we do when we hear non-inclusive language? What's expected of us? How do we react? And how do we support people who may be going through transitioning or difficulties in coming to terms with their sexuality, and how we support those people? Something simple like that can have a huge knock-on effect, just that these young people feel that they are recognised, that they will be listened to, and that sport will be somewhere where they could exist happily as a member of in this case, the GAA community and the LGBT community. The Rainbow Laces campaign is a fantastic initiative by SuperValu to raise that awareness and that visibility, in that we're hoping that it will pick up as kind of a great accessory for the young children around the country, that the parents will give them their rainbow laces to lace up their boots and to wear with pride for the month of June. And I think it would add a smile to the members of the GAA communities around the country to see the young people of the country wearing rainbow laces.
Every time we seem to have you on, David, the issue of ref abuse is always in the news. The conversation has probably gotten slightly worse with last month than the Kilkenny referees boycott in response to that threatening letter sent out to a Kilkenny referee. We've talked to you about the assault in Ballyfour back in September, or in August, I should say, and the assault on a referee in a Wexford Junior A football match. It feels like it's kind of getting worse. I know last time we had you on, I think you said never has it entered your mind that your physical well-being would be under threat when you're going out to ref. But 9 months on, is it in the back of your mind now that, gosh, I really hope I make it home in one piece?
It is. It's small there. I tell you, when I felt it most recently was in the Ulster final when I refereed Armagh and Derry, and I don't know whether people can really appreciate what it's like to referee a match like that, to not know whether you've missed something, whether you've potentially caused a problem or a game-changing decision, and you see this flood of people leave the stands and run onto the field. If you're a player, you're going to be lifted up on the shoulders of those people, and they're delighted with what's just happened. But as a referee, you don't know who's going to come in and do something stupid there and hit you or abuse you. I have 4 members of my own family there who at the time I was looking around for as well, because I wanted to make sure they were okay. And that is a little bit frightening. I am not saying I want to see the end of people rushing onto the field. I'm just explaining the emotions that I would have in a scenario like that. Do I feel things have gotten better or worse? I'm unsure. I don't see anything personally in my life that would change the way I felt. However, that's not saying that I don't hear the conversations of other referees and speak to them around what's going on in their own counties. It does need to be looked at, and I think it's too simple an answer just to say, Croke Park need to do more. Croke Park are doing the best that they can. People need to sit back and look at themselves and look at their own values and their morals and where they are socially, and it needs a whole cultural change. But I think we need to start looking at the person themselves rather than trying to shift the blame onto Croke Park.
And that certainly seems to be the theme around some of the abuse and the responses to the abuse, not just of referees. We saw a couple of months ago, Lee Chin was subjected to racial abuse at a challenge match between Wexford and Tipperary. So you're absolutely right. And last time you were on, you were talking about how respect, we talk about bringing on respect, and fans and everybody need to be respectful towards players and referees, but that respect is actually this really intangible thing, and no two definitions of respect are the same. The Go Games seems like a great opportunity to instill that in young players, that it's a place where the stakes are a little bit lower, you can train their skills, but also train them to treat the referees with a little bit more dignity and treat them as humans. Is that part of the plan with that initiative?
Well, it should be. Go Games are supposed to be non-competitive games where every child gets a go. That's the whole idea behind the Go Games, that they are small-sided, that the children get to practice their skills, that they get to learn, that they get to be social and friendly, that there isn't a win-at-all-cost mentality, that there's no pressure put on the child, that there's nobody excluded or being sat on a bench or told you're not good enough to play because you don't have as good a skill set as the person sitting beside you. There's nothing worse than being excluded as a child for games. And I think the Go Games is a wonderful opportunity to instill within the coaches and mentors at that level, the parents, as well as the children, the idea of respect, and respect towards the children playing, who are allowed experience the fun and joy of playing, but also for the referees concerned also, because most of the referees at those levels, particularly in the bigger counties, are from, a young whistlers program. They are the teenagers or the transition year students going out to make 20 quid and enjoy their 30 minutes or 40 minutes of football, where everyone gets to go have a go.
And do you know, have you been or have other referees been consulted in maybe having a module like that in the Go Games? And if not, would you be open to that?
Oh no, I deliver the Young Whistlers programme for Common One School in Dublin, where we train up primary school children to referee the games at half time in Croke Park. And I know there are Young Whistler programmes in many of the counties, and probably the most successful one I think is ran by Dublin. But I've been involved with the Young Whistlers programme in Meath, and it's a fantastically foresightful initiative to get young people involved in refereeing. I mean, the match report cost them €1 to send in, but they're getting €20 for their morning's fun, and that's what it should be. It's supposed to be fun.
And those kind of programs, I know you've said it in the past, that a lot of people don't go into refereeing voluntarily, that it's usually someone hasn't turned up and they need someone who kind of understands the rules. But you'd like to see or envision a world where kids are actually doing it because they want to, and that there's enough of an incentive there that you go, actually, I mightn't want to play, but I can still get involved by being a ref, and it's actually an attractive prospect. Is there one thing you think that maybe it's not limited to GAA, but sport in general, do you think there's something that we can do to make that more incentivized and to get more young people involved?
That's a really difficult one, because I'm not sure I've ever thought about that, something to incentivize referees. It's a very difficult job to get into, and you're expected to know the rules at a level far beyond players and managers' knowledge of them. But I mean, a clear pathway, I suppose, is vital at that. If you're a young fella and you're brought to under 14 county squads or trials, I don't know, 16s, and you're put on a divisional squad, south or north, and you're brought onto the county team, that there's a career pathway there for you. And there should be the same within refereeing pathways as well, that there can be a clear pathway that people would understand. I mean, Thomas Gleeson from Dublin, I think, is the best example of that we have. He was a Go Games referee, did the Common One School primary whistlers, the Go Games within Dublin, and is now refereeing at elite championship level, or certainly within the National League at the moment, and going for elite championship level. And to be able to see someone like that progress from a child right up to an adult referee is fantastic.
I think it's a positive note to end on, David. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me today. You were speaking as part of the Wear With Pride Laces initiative for Pride 2023, and during the month of June, rainbow laces will be available to purchase in local SuperValu stores across the country, with all proceeds going to support Belong To LGBTQ+ Youth Ireland. David Gough, GAA referee, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.